Chapter 465. After smoothing out the Stargate opened by the Silver Shadow Empire's expeditionary army, Lianping had connected to the other party's artificial intelligence. The artificial intelligence used by the other party's space battleships was a photon computer. It was a computer that used photons instead of electrons to transmit data, breaking through the limits of silicon technology. However, in terms of computing power, it still could not compare to Lianping's brain. More than 4 billion space battleships were hacked by Lianping in an instant. Then, their permissions were completely modified, and they became the spoils of war for the Earthlings. The 10 million fleets that were still in the fish tank on Mars' orbit were enough for the Earthlings to take over. Therefore, Lianping planned to leave the 4 billion main battleships here to prevent the other party from invading again after opening the Stargate. Just as Lianping resolved the crisis in the solar system, the situation on the White Land was also changing. During the period when the Silver Shadow Empire was besieging the solar system, the Purple Cloud Palace in Chauga City had also engaged in great battles. Compared to the extremely spacious solar system, the distance between the two parties on the White Land was countless times shorter. The intensity of the battle were countless times more brutal than the battle between Earth and the Silver Shadow Empire. Most of the ability users on Earth had basically come to the White Land. Compared to the spacious universe where they were unable to display their abilities, they were obviously more useful here. However, the enemies they faced were also more difficult to deal with than the Silver Shadow Empire's expeditionary army. They were a group of people who called themselves cultivators. Like ability users, they also had different levels. From the lowest level, Chi channeling, foundation establishment, out-of-body, golden core, nascent soul, and all the way to the final level, void transformation. However, according to the data collected by the Earth's army, the combat power of cultivators varied greatly, even if they were of the same level. Take the golden core cultivators, who were starting to pose a threat to the human army, as an example. The weakest golden core cultivator was roughly equivalent to a top-notch level 4 ability user. As for the strongest Aurus core stage cultivators recorded by humanity, their battle prowess was roughly equivalent to peak level 5 ability users like Thunder Emperor and Titan. In particular, due to the variety of magic treasures and spells, their defensive and offensive power didn't have any obvious shortcomings. As for the cultivators below the peak of the core formation stage, their combat ability was nothing to be feared. Most of them were still not as good as the airships, battle machines, and high-intensity bombardments of human beings. It could be said that the war on the Land of White was a war in which the Purple Cloud Palace mainly relied on high-end forces, and the humans relied on numbers to make up for it. In the past year, humans had killed at least several thousand out-of-body stage cultivators, hundreds of golden core stage cultivators, and 6 nascent soul stage cultivators, including a true disciple. Among them, the thousands of out-of-body cultivators were the result of the Purple Cloud Palace underestimating the power of the human army in the beginning. After confirming the powerful firepower of the human army, no cultivators below the golden core stage appeared again. The number of deaths in the war didn't seem to be much, but the combat power contained in it was very shocking. It could be said that if the demigod Dionysus wasn't on the magic planet, the loss of this group of self-cultivators would be enough to crush the entire magic planet. As for the Chi channeling stage and foundation establishment stage cultivators, they had never appeared from the beginning to the end. According to the General Staff's guess, these cultivators were the foundation of the Purple Cloud Palace. Their combat ability wasn't strong, and they were equivalent to human military school students, so they probably wouldn't go to the battlefield easily. What the people on Earth didn't know was that although the population of the Purple Cloud Palace wasn't as exaggerated as that of the Silver Shadow Empire, the sect occupied an area of more than 10 Earths. The entire Purple Cloud Palace's population was still more than 100 billion, and there were about 2 million cultivators among them. The rest were ordinary people who served the cultivators. As time passed, the war became more and more intense, and both sides invested more and more high-end forces. Ever since the nascent soul stage cultivators appeared, and then half a year ago, the 10 true disciples of the Purple Cloud sect moved out one after another. Ordinary mechanized human troops gradually became useless against these monsters. The only ones who could really fight against these powerful cultivators were human ability users equipped with interstellar armors. But even human ability users equipped with interstellar armors had to rely on numbers and cooperation to have a chance of winning against cultivators in the core formation stage and even the nascent soul stage. Only some powerful level 5 or level 6 ability users could fight against cultivators in the core formation stage and the nascent soul stage. As for the mechanized troops sent by the other colonial worlds to support the indigenous warriors and the humans themselves, most of them were just cannon fodder. The strongest forces of the Purple Cloud Palace in Chowga City were the Void Transformation Stage, cultivators, and level 7 ability users. The 5 elders of the Purple Cloud Palace and Bai Xinghe had arranged to fight 5 times in a row in the past year. Each battle could be said to be earth-shattering, and the aftermath of each battle could radiate to a radius of 10,000 miles. No one was able to make a move. However, after the continuous battles and probing, the humans had used up all their trump cards on the Land of White, but the Purple Cloud Palace had yet to use their full strength. In particular, the humans had to fight against the Purple Cloud Palace and the Silver Shadow Empire on 2 fronts at the same time. As a result, the humans were gradually at a disadvantage when facing the attacks of the Purple Cloud Palace. North of Chowga City, 8,000 kilometers away, hundreds of human soldiers in interstellar armors were heading north at a high speed. Their bodies were enveloped by white force field armors, and the back of the armors shot out blue tail flames. Together with the effect of the anti-gravity engine, each of them could rush north at 7 times the speed of sound. In the north where they were heading, the soaring flames and thunderclouds had covered the entire sky. 3 days ago, Bai Xinghe and the 5 elders of the Purple Cloud Palace had arranged to fight again at the Phoenix Crying Gorge in the north of Chowga City. However, this time, the 5 elders of the Purple Cloud Palace used the most precious magical equipment of the Purple Cloud sect, the Prime Clear Catalog. Together with the strength of the 5 elders of the Purple Cloud Palace, 12 nascent soul stage cultivators, and 108 golden core stage cultivators, they set up the 9 heavens and 10 earth starlight extinction array. They wanted to trap Bai Xinghe in the array and burn him to death with a true fire for 49 days. In Chowga City, all the human troops had been dispatched and were heading to the Phoenix Crying Gorge to rescue Bai Xinghe. However, this time, the Purple Cloud Palace had sent out all the 10 true transmission disciples, including a new true transmission disciple who had lost a true transmission disciple, and all the elders who were on duty. They had set up lines of defense within 1,000 miles around the 9 heavens and 10 earth starlight extinction array to prevent the humans from coming to the rescue. Looking at the flames in the north, the group of human soldiers became even more anxious. Once Bai Xinghe died, it would be impossible for the entire human race to fight against the Void Transformation Stage cultivators head-on. The Purple Cloud Palace would be completely in their favor. In the last row of the team, Lin Yin was also wearing an interstellar armor. He was rushing forward like an ordinary soldier. Over the past year, despite the objections of his seniors, he had been fighting against the cultivators on the White Land for a long time. With his superior talents and long-term training, both his abilities and combat experience had improved rapidly. He had once killed several cultivators in the Golden Core stage on his own. After learning that Bai Xinghe was trapped, he was also very anxious. Therefore, he followed a troop to reinforce him. While the group of human soldiers was rushing on their way, a giggle echoed in their ears. "Hee, junior brother, we are quite lucky. There seem to be a few fat fish in this group of armored monsters. Asking for other people's things is just a crooked way." The man's voice was filled with coldness. "Dao-cutting sword kill." As the word kill was uttered, a sword aura swept past, and the chests of the 5 human soldiers in the first row were pierced through. An anxious voice echoed from the communicators of the human soldiers. "Watch out for the flying sword. It's a true transmission disciple. Attention, all units. Use Formation B to fight." Chapter 466. The so-called B formation was a kind of scattered formation. Although the defense of the interstellar armor was enough for human ability users to survive in most extreme environments, it was still hard to defend against the various strange attacks of the cultivators. Therefore, when encountering a small number of strong cultivators, such as the true disciples, the Earth troops would often use a scattered formation to reduce losses. Under the command of the team's captain, Feng Haojia, several hundred people instantly spread out. Moving at a speed of over 7 times the speed of sound, coupled with the optical camouflage ability, they instantly spread out across the vast land like sand, creating a battlefield that spanned over 10 kilometers. Mar, where are they? Feng Haojia and Lin Yin ran forward together as they asked their team members. Cultivators could often cast spells over tens or even hundreds of kilometers away, so using psychic energy to investigate was very inefficient and even useless. At this time, ability users with reconnaissance abilities in the team needed to use their abilities or some high-tech equipment to find out the other party's location. The brown-haired woman named Marg opened her eyes, and the scene several kilometers away appeared in her pupils. She used the interstellar armor's built-in thermal detection and brainwave detection to reduce the search range. After more than a year of cruel war, these two methods, one to detect attack traces and the other to detect thoughts and consciousness, were considered the most effective way to find the enemy's tracks. A few seconds later, Marg, who had fantasy vision and could see far away, had already found the other party. Her voice was transmitted to everyone's ears through the communicator. 16. 6 degrees to the west of north, 8,942 meters away from the captain, an altitude of 320 meters. There are 2 people in total, suspected to be the true disciples Hua Baihe and Xie Wanjian. They seem to be using ice and snow defense methods. Clearly, the Earth military had collected a lot of information on the other party's powerful cultivators during the war. Halfway through her sentence, Marg's breathing quickened. They're attacking again, and their target is me. Hide where you are. I'm coming over. Feng Haojia had just finished speaking and was about to personally protect Marg when Lin Yin's voice rang in his ears. I'll go. Your ability is suitable for close combat. The next moment, the kinetic energy of the exoskeleton combined with Lin Yin's own electromagnetic drive ability allowed him to explode to 12 times the speed of sound, and he rushed toward Marg's position. A terrifying shriek pierced through the air and pierced through the earth. Hearing Lin Yin's words, Feng Haojia frowned. However, he also knew that these 2 true disciples were not to be underestimated. Now was not the time to worry. He then ordered, Team 1, aim at the target and attack. Team 2, support Lin Yin and Mago. Yisun will send me over. With 2 swishing sounds, Feng Haojia pulled out a single-molecule vibrating blade in each of his hands, as well as a long sword that was completely made up of vibrating red lightning bolts. Clearly, after a long period of cultivation, he had completely mastered the sword of Tatsuka that Li Onping had given him. He was able to solidify the red particle decomposition rays into swords that could be both long and short. Following his command, the ability user called Yi Sun also activated his quantum transmission ability, sending Feng Haojia, who was most proficient in close combat, to the side of the 2 true disciples. On the other side, the members of Group 1 had already used their Gaussian sniper rifles, electromagnetic cannons, portable missiles, and other long-range weapons to aim at the 2 true disciples who were about 9 kilometers away. At the same time, accompanied by a terrifying shriek, Xie Wanjian's beheading flying sword had already pierced toward Mago, who was hiding behind a rock, leaving behind a trail of green sword light. The rock was no different from tofu in front of this flying sword. Even before the flying sword came into contact with the rock, the green sword light had already smashed all obstacles into smithereens. Of course, Mago would not allow herself to be trampled on. While retreating rapidly through the space armor's antimatter engine, she raised both her hands and released 2 laser cannons in the direction where the flying sword came from. In the face of the flying sword's speed, it was impossible for ordinary weapons to hit it. However, although the laser cannons were fast enough, Mago's accuracy was far from being able to hit Xie Wanjian's flying sword technique. If it were not for her fantasy vision ability that allowed her to see the flying sword's trajectory clearly, she would not even be able to aim and fire the laser cannons. Even so, the beheading flying sword was like a swimming fish. It dodged the two laser cannons in advance and stabbed toward Mago's chest. Before the sharp sword light arrived, it had already left a white mark on Mago's helmet. This cannot be helped. Not every ability user had the ability to move at supersonic speed. Usually, they could fly at supersonic speed at low altitudes and travel without a problem. However, once they started fighting, most ability users would not be able to use supersonic speed in close combat. In other words, they would not be able to react in time. Only a small number of people who practice secret martial arts, or people with innate ability, were able to react in time. In Fang Haojia's team, there was an ability user who was good at, or was used to, supersonic combat. Just as Mago did not realize that she was about to die under the sword, a palm wrapped in white armor with a strong electric light had already grabbed the beheading flying sword. Just like that, Lin Yin gripped the flying sword tightly in his hand. It was like a struggling fish, constantly swinging left and right. However, if one looked closely, the flying sword was not tightly attached to the armor. Instead, there was a very close distance between them as Lin Yin grabbed it in his hand. Although the force field armor was powerful, the high-speed vibrations of the flying sword, as well as the intense radiation contained in the body of the sword, had an extremely strong effect on cutting through material. It was equivalent to the combination of a high-frequency blade and a plasma blade, and the strength of the material itself was far above that of these two weapons. The reason why Lin Yin's hand was not cut off was that he used his own electromagnetic ability to grab the flying sword, not the power of flesh and blood. Moreover, Lin Yin could already exert tens of thousands of tons of power with his electromagnetic drive ability. Xie Wanjian's flying sword could not stretch out for a while. "Kid, you're courting death." Xie Wanjian's eyes flashed with electric light. As he pinched his sword, the beheading flying sword in Lin Yin's hand suddenly shrunk hundreds of times. Then, it broke free from Lin Yin's electromagnetic restraint with a bang. The shrunken flying sword became even more dangerous. The flying sword, which was only a few inches long, was like a small meteor. Ordinary people could not see it clearly, let alone dodge it. Fortunately, Lin Yin had the electromagnetic drive ability. In the detection of electromagnetic waves, this kind of metal flying sword was as obvious as the moon in the night sky. He did not want to be entangled with the opponent. He grabbed Mago, who had not yet reacted, and ran directly to the back. At this time, the second team support also arrived. More than 10 phantoms identical to Lin Yin and Mago rose from the two of them and ran in all directions. Whether it was vision, hearing, heat, energy, or airflow, these phantoms were indistinguishable. This made Xie Wanjian's beheading flying sword hesitate for a moment and float motionlessly in the air. At this moment, Hua Baihe's laughter rang in Xie Wanjian's ears again. "Junior brother, look at how flustered you are. Do you need my help?" Although she asked, she waved her hand at the same time. A cold wind instantly swept out from her cuff, freezing all the long-range attacks of the first team in midair. However, Xie Wanjian naturally knew that Hua Baihe was not referring to these little tricks. He snorted coldly and stared coldly at Fang Haojia, who had just teleported over 2 meters away. "My sword Dao is to press forward and advance bravely. If I can't even cut through these crooked methods, what's the point of practicing the sword? What's the point of cultivating?" The sword light all over his body skyrocketed. The strength of a nascent soul realm finally broke out completely. Within 100 miles of his body, it had completely turned into a world of sword light. There were no swords, only sword light. They could not touch or block, but they could cut through everything. This was the fundamental magical power of the heavenly sword edge, one of the top 10 true inheritances, the pure jade sword mantra. In the direction of the beheading flying sword, the flying sword hummed softly and then flew into the sky. Then, 1 became 2, 2 became 4, 4 became 8. In the blink of an eye, there were already tens of thousands of flying swords suspended in the air. Thousand-sword meteor. The next moment, the swords fell like rain. He did not care which one was real and which one was fake. He just wanted to pierce and cut through everything between heaven and earth. Chapter 467. Each of the cutting path flying swords was only a few inches long, and they were like raindrops. They dashed toward the ground at several tens of times the speed of sound at the same time, as if there was an unprecedented downpour. However, their prowess far surpassed that of ordinary raindrops. Terrifying screeches spread out in layers in the air, and they would tear and pierce through everything on the ground. Even Lin Yin would find it difficult to dodge the large-scale attacks of the flying swords at such speeds. He could only perform the electromagnetic passport with all his might, shrouding his entire body with a layer of strong electromagnetic field, hoping to block the other party's attack. However, at this moment, the flying swords, which had turned into streams of light, suddenly became clear to Lin Yin. No, it's not that I become clear. It's that they become slower. By the time Lin Yin reacted to this, the speed of the descending flying swords had already dropped to a speed of a few meters per second, and then they became increasingly slower. When the power of the electromagnetic shield that Lin Yin had set up earlier reached its peak, all the flying swords in the sky had come to a standstill. Lin Yin was the only one present who could react to the change in speed. When he raised his head and looked at the flying swords that had come to a standstill in the sky, he felt strange. Then a cry of surprise rang out from behind him. "Your Majesty!" Mag exclaimed and jumped down from Lin Yin's back, half kneeling on the ground. At the same time, voices of surprise and agitation rang out one after another in the communication channel. Lin Yin's mind went blank for a moment. Then, he looked in the direction where Mag was kneeling. A man in a white robe with long black hair, fluttering in the wind like a black flame, was standing quietly in front of him, looking at him. The man gave off a very strange feeling. He was like an ordinary person, but also like an untouchable and unapproachable starry sky. Lin Yin only looked at him in a daze. He wanted to say something, but in the end, he did not say those two words. He only said anxiously, "Brother Fong is fighting with a true transmission disciple. Uncle Bai is trapped by the people from the Purple Firmament sect. There's no need to worry about Bai Xinghe. It's only a matter of time before he escapes. Moreover, this time around, he managed to escape with his own power." Li Yonping nodded his head. He looked at Lin Yin with a strange look in his eyes. "I've already stopped Fong Haojie. Go and save him." "Me?" At this moment, the several hundred warriors in the surroundings had all come to Li Yonping. They knelt down on one knee, looking at Li Yonping with a look of worship. They were looking at their god. The battle no longer had anything to do with them. In their hearts, as long as Li Yonping appeared, then all the problems would no longer be a problem. Humanity would usher in victory. Li Yonping smiled. "Then I'll help you make it 100%. A stream of white light appeared in his hands. Then the photons combined and connected together. In just a few seconds, a red cloak appeared in Li Yonping's hands. This was created by Li Yonping using his energy to create something out of thin air. After the cloak appeared, it floated up and draped over Lin Yin's back. This cloak can negate all electromagnetic forces, gravitational forces, strong forces, and weak forces. Its negation limit is very high. Most of the attacks in the universe will be ineffective against you." Lin Yin touched the cloak on his shoulders. He could not believe that such an ordinary-looking cloak could have such an amazing effect. He did not expect that this cloak was created by Li Yonping on the spot. He thought that Li Yonping was the one who had given it to him. "What's the name of this cloak?" Li Yonping said casually. "It can be called the invulnerable cloak." Lin Yin frowned. He felt that this name was too old-fashioned. However, Li Yonping's palms immediately lit up with white light again. It was still the same energy to create something out of thin air. A pair of red gloves appeared on his palms. The words, "One strike," were written on the red gloves. Lin Yin looked at the gloves curiously and asked, "What's this?" "This can be called the one-strike kill gloves. Li Onping thought for a moment and explained, the physical structure of the target hit by this pair of gloves will collapse due to the loss of the restraints of the four major forces. His consciousness algorithm will be directly disintegrated, and, at the same time, he will be erased both physically and mentally. This pair of gloves can kill 99% of the things in the universe with one strike. Seeing the gloves loosen on their own and float onto his hands, a strange feeling spread from his hands to Lin Yin's body. One strike kill gloves? He felt that this name was very domineering. Attack and defense have been dealt with. Next is speed. As he spoke, Li Onping opened his hands again. With a flash of white light, a dagger hung on Lin Yin's waist. This will be called the leaping dagger. Li Onping explained, it can teleport through dimensional jumps. The range is about 1 light year. As long as you can see it, go there, or set the distance. There's no cooldown time. Just as Li Onping was still explaining, the impatient Lin Yin had already used the leaping dagger. The corners of Li Onping's lips curled up slightly. Seeing Lin Yin's figure disappear after a flash, he said calmly, kill them all, my child. After Lin Yin's figure disappeared, Li Onping snapped his fingers. Compared to the original design, a pure copy was much easier for him. With his snap of his fingers, the hundreds of human warriors around all flashed with white light. They were all equipped with the impenetrable cloak, the one-strike kill gloves, and the leaping dagger. There was a cold glint in Li Onping's eyes. It was as if he was breathing from the icy hell. He slowly ordered, within a radius of 1 light second, other than the humans from Earth and the warriors from the colonial planets, I don't want to see any other living things. Yes, sir. The warriors who were kneeling on the ground answered loudly. In the next moment, they all disappeared in a flash. They swept in all directions like a breeze, but what they brought with them was a merciless feast of slaughter. Li Onping's gaze was already looking in the direction of Lin Yin and the 2 true disciples. At the moment when the myriad sword meteor was displayed, Xie Wanjian felt that the entire world seemed to have come to a standstill. It was not that time had stopped, because his consciousness was still operating. However, regardless of whether it was the vital essence in his body, the muscles on his body, or the flying sword in the distance, all of them had come to a standstill and could not move at all. He could see Hua Baihe in the corner of his eyes. Her face was also filled with horror. Obviously, she could not move at all. This was because Li Onping had frozen the space and changed the distance between the pieces of space, causing them to become amber frozen in space. But fortunately, the Earth warriors on the opposite side seemed to have also encountered some abnormalities. After appearing, they retreated and did not attack them. What the 2 true disciples did not know was that this was Li Onping giving Feng Haoji an order. About 10 seconds later, a short human warrior appeared in front of the 2 of them. Xie Wanjian recognized that this earthling was the mortal who had grabbed his flying sword just now. Under his disdainful gaze, the short man's fist, which was wearing a red glove, smashed toward his chest. Although the opponent's speed and strength were far beyond that of ordinary people, in Xie Wanjian's opinion, it was still just ordinary strength. Although Xie Wanjian was focused on swordsmanship and did not have any other magic weapons on him, his protective sword aura alone was enough to defend against the opponent's attack. He was more worried about why he and Hua Baihe were in a standstill. What kind of ability was this? However, under Xie Wanjian's disdainful gaze, the red fist smashed into his chest. He did not even have time to react. His entire body, whether it was his nascent soul, vital essence, meridians, muscles, and bones, had all been disintegrated into particles that were difficult to distinguish with the naked eye. Not only his physical body, but his consciousness was also completely wiped out. He could not be more dead. Li Onping smiled. Hua Baihe, who was in the distance, suddenly realized that she could move. She let out a cry of surprise and cast a spell to freeze everything within 10,000 miles. The temperature within a radius of 1,000 miles instantly dropped to negative 200 degrees Celsius. She then turned into a streak of light and flew rapidly towards the north. Whether it was the inexplicable standstill just now or Lin Yin's ordinary punch that killed Xie Wanjian instantly, she was both shocked and angry. However, the opponent's attack was too strange. She had to retreat temporarily before thinking of a solution. Chapter 468. Hua Baihe's entire body turned into a blue light. In the blink of an eye, she was already hundreds of miles away. However, Shorty, who had just killed Xie Wanjian, flashed and appeared in front of her again. He threw a punch at her head. Hua Baihe could not feel any true essence, nor any powerful energy fluctuations. In her divine sense, the opponent's punch was just an ordinary punch, but speed and strength were far beyond that of ordinary people. However, it was such an ordinary punch that had just killed Xie Wanjian. At this time, seeing the opponent's punch, Hua Baihe did not dare to take it head-on. The light turned and rushed to the sky. At the same time, the Ice Spirit Holy Light had already enveloped the opponent. The Ice Spirit Holy Light was one of the 10 fundamental magical powers of the Purple Cloud Palace that Hua Baihe cultivated. It was a spell of the 7 ancient frost techniques. However, the Ice Spirit Holy Light, which could easily freeze a city and even completely freeze consciousness, thoughts, and souls, did not have any effect on the opponent at this time. This was all because Lin Yin was wearing an invulnerable cloak. As long as the attack was still composed of the 4 basic forces, as long as the attack method did not exceed all the phenomena in the universe and the upper limit of the cloak, this cloak was invincible. Hua Baihe's countless subsequent tests also proved this point. All kinds of cold attacks, Ice Spirit Holy Sword, Frost Poison, Ice Flame Strangulation, low temperature, high temperature, cutting vibration, and even poison and divine sense attacks were all ineffective. If she wanted to trap the opponent, whether it was magic weapons, flying swords, or changing the terrain, they would all be destroyed by the opponent's punch. What made Hua Baihe even more terrified was that the opponent had a teleportation method similar to Qingquan Shift. No matter how fast Hua Baihe accelerated or escaped, the opponent would appear beside her in an instant and give her a punch. At first, the opponent was still a little unfamiliar with this attack method, but relying on his invincible defense, the opponent quickly adapted and began to use Hua Baihe as a sparring partner, like a cat playing with a mouse. When Hua Baihe used up all her magic weapons, talismans, and used all her means, but still could not stop the opponent, despair began to envelop her heart. 800 years of cultivation, I didn't expect it to end today. With a boom, Lin Yin's fist smashed into Hua Baihe's body. The opponent's body disintegrated instantly and completely disappeared between heaven and earth, leaving no trace behind. Above the Phoenix Cry Gorge, the sky was filled with flames and thunderclouds that enveloped an area of over 100 miles. In the sky of over 100 miles, countless spaces were folded, causing the sky to actually contain over 10,000 miles of space. Various radiations that represented the elements of wind, thunder, earth, and fire filled the sky, annihilating everything within the formation. In the sky more than 10 kilometers away, Shang Tian was wearing a purple robe. His hair and clothes were fluttering without wind. He was looking at the 9 heavens, 10 earths starlight extinction array in the sky with satisfaction. When the Purple Cloud Palace first began to fight with the Earth Army, they were very cautious. This was because, according to Shang Tian's information, the Earth's human emperor, a mortal called Li Anping, was extremely powerful. Most cultivators didn't think much of it at first, believing that no matter how strong a mortal was, they couldn't threaten cultivators. However, what they didn't lack the most was time, so they still decided to test it out. It was also because of this test that thousands of out-of-body stage cultivators had died that they began to take Earth's military strength seriously, as well as the power of technological weapons. This was also why the Purple Cloud Palace no longer sent cultivators below the Gold Core stage. They began to use Gold Core stage and nascent Soul stage cultivators as the main battle force. In fact, it proved that their strategy was correct. To deal with human technological weapons, the Purple Cloud Palace suppressed them with high-end forces, which was much more practical than using numbers. However, the high-end combat power of Earth, especially by Xinghe, Jingguang, Yin Bei, and the others, also made the Purple Cloud Palace's cultivators realize the power of ability users. Therefore, they paid more attention to the strongest human being, Li Anping, that was highlighted in Shang Tian's information. However, after many battles and tests, the Purple Cloud Palace discovered some problems. The strongest human being, Li Anping, seemed to be gone. After confirming this news several times and confirming that Li Anping had left Earth and left human society, the Purple Cloud Palace began to gradually increase the forces they invested in the battlefield, such as the top 10 true transmission disciples and the elders at the Void transformation stage. After hearing this news, Shang Tian was both relieved and disappointed. However, he was no longer willing to wait for an Earth without Li Anping. After his repeated persuasion and cooperation, the Purple Cloud Palace finally took out their most precious treasure, the Shangqing Catalog, and used the 9 Heavens and 10 Earth Starlight Extinction Array to kill Bai Xinghe. Once Bai Xinghe is dead, the rest of Yin Bei and Jingguang will no longer be a threat. By then, the entire human race and the entire Earth will be conquered by the Purple Cloud Palace. Hee, Li Anping, what will you do when you return to Earth and see all this? Shang Tian laughed. I'm really looking forward to your expression when the time comes. Just as Shang Tian was lost in his imagination, a golden light flashed beside him. Jian Hui, one of the top 10 true transmission disciples, had already used the sword escape technique to come to his side. Looking at Shang Tian, who was smiling, he asked curiously, Junior brother Shang, what are you smiling about? Nothing. Shang Tian pursed his lips and explained, it's just that Bai Xinghe is trapped in the 9 Heavens and 10 Earth Starlight Extinction Array. He is dead for sure. After this battle, no one on Earth will be able to stop us. Bai Xinghe, Jian Hui raised his eyebrows and said, this man is indeed a genius. He has been able to cultivate such a small martial art to such a high level, and he has been able to persist in the 9 Heavens and 10 Earth Starlight Extinction Array for 3 days and 3 nights. He is truly remarkable. The 9 Heavens and 10 Earth Starlight Extinction Array was based on 5 immortals at the Void transformation stage in the Shangqing Catalog, the most precious treasure of the Purple Cloud Palace. Together with 12 nascent Soul Stage cultivators and 108 Golden Core Stage cultivators, it could reverse space and time and burn the opponent with 12 highest heavenly fire. Although they had been preparing for 49 days, most people did not think that Bai Xinghe could persist in the array for a full 49 days. It would be very impressive if he could persist for 1 or 2 days. Shang Tian said with a smile. However, senior brother Jian Hui, there is no need to belittle yourself. No matter how powerful the secret martial arts are, they are nothing but small tricks. Only the arts of Taoism, which the cultivators are convinced by, and the cultivators are immortal, are the real Taoists. At this moment, the sky was densely covered with lightning snakes. With the deafening thunder, the soaring flames dyed the entire phoenix cry gorge red. Jian Hui looked at the distant sky and murmured, the second divine dragon fire has begun. I wonder how long Bai Xinghe can persist. Chapter 469. While Jian Hui and Shang Tian were talking, more and more fire clouds appeared in the sky. Apart from the red flames and the blue and white lightning, there were also traces of golden flames in the sky. It was the divine dragon fire of the 12 Heavens, 10 Earths Starlight Extinction Array. It had the miraculous effect of incinerating everything. It also meant that the array had entered the second stage. When the disciples of the Purple Cloud Palace who were guarding the 9 Heavens, 10 Earth Starlight Extinction Array saw the golden flames in the array begin to burn, they concluded that Bai Xinghe would not be able to hold on for much longer. However, just as Jian Hui was observing the situation in the array, her Jade Communication talisman rang. It was not just her. The Jade Communication talismans of Shang Tian, beside her, and all the other true teachings disciples rang as well. The content of the Jade Talisman was very simple. It was about Hua Baihe and Xie Wanjian, two of the top 10 true teachings disciples. Their soul lamps in the purple cloud palace had been extinguished. This meant that not only were their physical bodies dead, but even their nascent souls could not escape. They had been completely annihilated. They could not even reincarnate and cultivate again. The death of two true disciples was a serious loss for any true cultivator sect. However, an hour later, the jade talisman rang again. The soul lamps of another 3 true teachings disciples had been extinguished. At the same time, more than 100 golden elixir disciples had been killed. What's going on? Jianhui frowned. Has the human army come to besiege us? But why have we lost so many people? Within a few thousand miles of the 9 heavens 10 earth starlight extinction array, all the disciples of the purple cloud palace seemed to be enveloped by an invisible net. It was as if some unknown monster was constantly devouring their lives. Jianhui began to contact the other true teachings disciples and elders. Uncle Shinsu, what's going on? Why have so many junior brothers been sacrificed? I don't know. No one saw what happened. Shinsu's mouth revealed a trace of coldness. All the disciples who saw it have disappeared. Until now, we still don't know what the enemy is. Until now, we still don't know. Jianhui raised her eyebrows and said, Uncle Shinsu, where's the nearest place that was attacked? I'll go and take a look. Jianhui, don't be rash. Senior brother sect leader already knows about the situation and will make arrangements immediately. While the two of them were talking, the voice of Xin the Taoist, the headmaster of the Purple Cloud Palace, had already been transmitted to everyone's sea of consciousness through the communication jade amulet. According to Xin the Taoist arrangement, in order to deal with unknown dangers, all of the members of the Purple Cloud Palace would shrink the defense line. The true disciples and elders would lead the ordinary disciples to guard the defense points selected by Xin the Taoist. Shang Tian and Jianhui each led a few dozen disciples to their designated locations. On the other hand, these elders and elite disciples had to maintain contact at all times and exchange information with each other, so they absolutely couldn't die without knowing why. But before they could make the necessary arrangements, the attack began again. The voice of a true disciple rang out from Shang Tian's communication jade amulet. It's the Earthlings, they're Black Star troopers. No, there's something strange about them. Spells, treasures, and flying swords are all useless against them. No attack is effective against them. No, we can't stop them. The panicked voices rang out one after another. They lost contact with familiar voices one after another, causing the remaining people to be even more at a loss. Although the cultivators of the Purple Cloud Palace were unable to withstand a single blow from the several hundred Black Star troopers armed by Li Anping, the shrinking defense line and defense points made them no longer ignorant. According to the descriptions of the Purple Cloud Palace disciples who were killed one by one, the attackers were a group of Black Star troopers draped in red cloaks. However, they were extremely powerful. Up until now, there were no treasures, spells, or flying swords that could harm them. Just as the elders and true disciples were shocked by the strength of this batch of Earthlings, something even more shocking happened. Xiansu was leading a few dozen golden core disciples and 2 nascent soul disciples to guard Stronghold. Suddenly, 5 Black Star troopers in red cloaks appeared in their line of sight. These 5 Black Star troopers each threw a punch, and 5 golden core cultivators were reduced to dust. Daoist Xiansu's eyes widened, and fury flashed across his face. How dare you? He spread out his sword fingers, and over 1,000 streams of sword light shot out toward the 5 Black Star troopers. With Daoist Xiansu's cultivation at the void transformation stage and the flying sword arts that he had refined for several thousand years, this one move would be able to turn a space battleship into nothingness. In his eyes, the 5 human Black Star troopers were definitely going to die. He had killed countless Black Star troopers like this over the past year. However, the 5 Black Star troopers' earlier appearance was strange, and their attacks were even stranger. After he released his flying sword, he still released a shuttle-type treasure as a precaution. Then, under his incredulous gaze, several thousand streams of sword light and sword cheese swept across the other party's body. However, they were like a gentle breeze that did not have any effect at all. How was this possible? This was Xian Su's first reaction. There were no barriers, no treasures, and no defensive actions. Even the Purple Cloud Palace's sect master would not be able to forcefully block his attacks with his body. However, not only had the people before him managed to do it, but there were also 5 of them. Faced with Xian Su's attacks, the other party did not have any reaction. They merely disappeared and then reappeared instantly. Then each of them threw out a punch, turning another 5 golden core realm cultivators into dust. Xian Su seemed to be able to see the other party's face behind the armor, sneering coldly. With a furious bellow, Xian Su spread out both his hands, and 9 flying swords shot out consecutively. They turned into several 100,000 streams of sword light and shot out toward the 5 people in an overwhelming manner. They worked together and made up for each other, forming a sword formation. The 5 people's bodies were like a sword ball, completely enveloping them, not leaving any blind spots. Simultaneously, Xian Su's shuttle-type treasure, the Myriad Thunder's cosmic light shuttle, kept on moving around the sword ball. Every second, there would be several thousand or 100 thunder snakes that were as thick as water buckets being sent into the sword ball. The nascent Soul Realm disciple at the side said, "Everyone, quickly use thunder elemental techniques and lend Martial Uncle a hand." Following his command, thousands and thousands of thunderbolts turned the sword ball into a ball of thunder that was as bright as the sun. The terrifying thunderbolts turned into a scorching high temperature. The Golden Core Realm disciples were the first to be unable to withstand it and quickly retreated. Following that, the nascent Soul Realm disciples also retreated. Only Elder Xian Su, who was at the Void Transformation Realm, continued to command his flying swords to guide the thunderbolts. He used the double damage of slashing and thunderbolts to kill his opponents. Faced with such an attack, the other party still did not seem to use any defensive means. Secondly, if they were to take it head-on, other than those exalted immortals in the heavenly court, Xian Su could not think of anyone else who would be able to survive such an attack. However, just as he was thinking about this, 5 fists broke through the sword net around him. Be it the flying swords or the heavenly thunderbolts, they were no different from paper in front of these fists. There was not even a hint of injury on the 5 people's bodies. It was as if they had lost their patience and stopped the surrounding attacks. Then, with a flash, another 5 Golden Core Realm disciples were killed. After that, the 5 of them looked at Elder Xian Su. They seemed to have enjoyed the feeling of a cat toying with a mouse, and the 5 of them flickered and vanished once more. Alarm bells rang madly in Xian Su's heart. Layer after layer of protective chi, magic treasures, and sword chi protected him in layers. However, it was useless. The 5 fists broke through all of Xian Su's defenses as if they had broken through paper windows. At the critical juncture, Xian Su started to rely on his faster reaction and speed to turn into a stream of light and escape into the sky. He felt as if his soul was about to leave his body. In his eyes, the 5 human warriors from earlier were experts that he had never seen before. Each of them was probably stronger than by Xinghe and the Purple Firmament 5 elders. He could not understand why the humans had 5 such experts and why they had only sent them out now. However, in the next moment, he no longer had the time to think so much. It was because a few seconds after he escaped, there was another flash and the red-caped human warriors appeared before him once again. However, this time around, there were 10 of them. Xian Su's eyes were filled with despair and disbelief. Why? Why are these mortals so powerful? I can't accept this. I can't accept this. Void Transformation Stage cultivators relied on the speed of the light, their quick reactions, and their intuition toward danger. It would take a lot of time for an ordinary red-caped interstellar warrior to kill them one-on-one. However, there were hundreds of such warriors now. They communicated with each other and could move freely within a space of 1 light year. They could form an advantageous force at any time and position and kill all the cultivators. Dozens of seconds later, the news that Taoist Xian Su's soul lamp had been extinguished spread to all the true disciples and elders. This was the first time that an elder at the Void Transformation stage had died in the war between the Purple Firmament Palace and Earth. However, what they did not know was that this was just the beginning. They had no idea what they were fighting against. Chapter 470. It was a one-sided situation where they could not even withstand a single blow. Faced with the interstellar warriors in red cloaks, the cultivators of the Purple Firmament sect felt as if they had become mortals before them. Before these interstellar warriors, they could only escape. They did not even have the right to retaliate. The Gene Dance stage cultivators had already been slaughtered within half an hour, and only 4 successor disciples were left of the nascent soul stage cultivators. Right now, only the Void Transformation stage cultivators could rely on some illusions, space, time, and escape techniques to tangle with the Black Star Troopers. However, even these illusions, space, and time attacks were still unable to escape the formation of the 4 great forces in the universe. At most, they could only temporarily harass the warriors in red cloaks and were unable to cause any real damage. As more and more warriors appeared, the Mystic Void Realm Elders were also about to be killed one by one. In just over an hour, all the cultivators of the Purple Firmament Palace in the periphery had been slaughtered. Under the leadership of the Purple Firmament Palace's sect master and Taoist Xian, the remaining cultivators gathered together. In the center of them, 5 old men had their eyes tightly shut. They were the Purple Firmament 5 elders who had unleashed the 9 heavens 10 earth's annihilation formation with all their might, wanting to trap and kill Bai Xinghe. As the Golden Core and nascent Soul Realm disciples who had set up the formation were killed one by one, the pressure on them suddenly increased. In the sky, several hundred interstellar warriors in red cloaks surrounded the remaining cultivators. Seeing that more and more warriors in red cloaks had appeared around them, the gazes of the people from the Purple Firmament Palace became increasingly gloomy and filled with despair. Shang Tian looked at the increasing number of Earth warriors around him in exasperation, completely unable to understand what was going on. Out of all the future timelines that he could connect to, none of them had ever seen anything like this. However, although he was a little worried, he still had trump cards that he could use to deal with all enemies. He was not as despairing as the cultivators around him. Where on earth did these people come from? Just as he was feeling puzzled and slightly uneasy, another man appeared in the sky among the interstellar warriors. The moment this man appeared, the surrounding interstellar warriors immediately surrounded him. Moreover, no one dared to stay in the sky above him. With him as the leader, they floated under the man's feet and behind him with the help of the space armor's anti-gravity engine. As soon as the man appeared, Shang Tian's pupils dilated. Veins popped out on his forehead, and an uncontrollable murderous aura was released from his body. It sounded as if he was weeping and complaining, as if he was speaking from the depths of hell. Li, En, Ping. The deep hatred contained in his words made the surrounding elders of the Purple Cloud Palace feel a chill. They could not imagine what kind of deep hatred could make Shang Tian, who is usually gentle and kind, reveal such a violent side. Taoist Xian had long noticed Li Onping among the Black Star Troopers. After all, Li Onping was wearing a white robe and was too eye-catching among the Black Star Troopers. When he heard Shang Tian's words, he frowned and sent a voice transmission to Shang Tian through his divine consciousness. This white-robed man is Li Onping, the Earth's human king that you mentioned. That's him. Shang Tian slowly calmed himself down, looked at Li Onping in the sky, and said, "These Black Star Troopers in red cloaks must be his doing." Taoist Xian looked at Li Onping in the sky, and a grim expression that had never appeared before appeared in his eyes. He had made a move against the several hundred Black Star Troopers in front of him earlier. However, even with his cultivation, he was unable to do anything to them. Until now, they still had no way of harming the Black Star Troopers in front of them. This made Li Onping appear even more unfathomable in his eyes. On the other side, Li Onping threw a glance at the people from the Purple Cloud Palace before him. Then he turned his gaze toward the 9 heavens 10 earths starlight extinction array that was surrounded by fire clouds and lightning. Li Nian, who was standing behind Li Anping, also looked at the flames in the sky. Other than his short stature, he did not seem to be any different from the other Black Star troopers. He looked at the fire clouds that were seething more and more intensely in the sky and said, "Will Uncle Bai be all right? Let's quickly go up and save him." "There's no hurry," he said calmly. "He'll be out in a while." At this moment, the cultivators from the Purple Cloud Palace seemed to be discussing something. Daoist Xian was the first to walk out. He looked at Li Anping in the sky and said, "Are you the king of the human race on Earth, Li Anping?" However, when faced with Daoist Xian's question, Li Anping did not even look at him. From the looks of it, he did not care about Daoist Xian and the Purple Cloud Palace at all. A hint of anger flashed across Daoist Xian's heart. However, after several thousand years of qi refinement, his Dao heart had long been polished to perfection. This bit of anger disappeared without a trace in the blink of an eye. It was as if it had never appeared in the first place, leaving no trace on his Dao heart at all. His expression did not change, and he said loudly again, "Since you've won today, why do you have to be so overbearing? Why don't we come to an agreement? We can also compensate Earth for their losses, and we can also release Bai Xinghe from the array. Otherwise, if the battle continues, although the Purple Cloud Palace is no match for you, the humans on Earth may not have it easy either. You may not know, king of the human race on Earth, but the strength of the Purple Cloud Palace is only average among the many immortal cultivation sections. Not to mention, there are the immortals in the heavenly court who are above the cultivators." Li Anping looked at Daoist Xian calmly. Perhaps it was Daoist Xian's illusion, but he felt that the emotion in Li Anping's eyes was pity. At this moment, an earth-shattering explosion came from the 9 Heavens 10 Earth Starlight Extinction Array. With a series of long howls, Bai Xinghe turned into a flash of light and rushed out of the array. If Li Anping had not intervened, he would only have a 30% chance of breaking out of the array. However, half an hour ago, because of the deaths of countless disciples who set up the array, he suddenly felt that the pressure around him was getting lighter and lighter. Finally, he managed to break out of the array with his own strength. Not only that, in the past 3 days and 3 nights, although he had consumed a lot of his strength, he had also tempered the energy and strength inside his body again, with the help of the heavenly fire and the method of acupoints in the array. Although he had suffered a great loss after breaking out of the array, his strength would be even higher after he recovered with rest and treatment. Stop him. Don't let him escape. As he broke out of the array, the 5 elders of Purple Firmament spat out a mouthful of blood at the same time. Their spiritual gas soared, and all kinds of magical equipment and flying swords smashed toward Bai Xinghe in the sky. Among them were seals as heavy as mountains, flying swords that could slow down time, bells that shuttled through space, and giant palms that gathered the fire of stars. Every attack was earth-shattering. It was obvious that they had been operating the array wholeheartedly and did not know what was going on outside. Seeing that they took action, Daoist Xian already had a bad feeling in his heart. Coldness beamed out of Shang Tian's eyes, and he dashed toward Li Anping in the sky in a flash of light. He even pretended to shout, "Devil, prepare to die." As Shang Tian and the 5 elders of Purple Firmament moved, a bitter smile flashed on Daoist Xian's face. He had no choice but to summon his spiritual gas for the last struggle. The other elders and disciples also roared and directed all their attacks toward Li Anping, Bai Xinghe, and the interstellar warriors. Chapter 471. Li Anping stretched out his hand, and Shang Tian, who had turned into a stream of light and was charging toward him, was grabbed by the neck like a little chick and held in his hand. On the other side, the interstellar cultivators had already swarmed forward, forcing the cultivators from the Purple Cloud Palace to retreat in defeat. Even veteran cultivators like the Purple Cloud Palace's 5 elders, who were at the void transformation stage, were unable to do anything to them. It was only a matter of time before they were killed or captured. Li Anping looked at Shang Tian, who was in his hand with a face full of hatred, and said calmly, The bloodline of the Shang clan? Not bad abilities, but a foolish choice. Humph, humph. Lianping, I know that I'm not a match for you. Shang Tian smiled, and his eyes were filled with a complacent expression, as if his scheme had succeeded. But if you want to defeat someone, you don't have to be stronger than them. As he finished speaking, a bump appeared on Shang Tian's forehead in the center of his brows. A piece of chaotic colored fragment broke through his skin and came out from the center of his brows. It looked just like his eye. As this fragment came out from his skin, streams of chaotic colored light shone on Lianping's body. Countless information covered his eyes, and his entire body stopped moving. Seeing that Lianping was looking at the fragment without moving, Shang Tian laughed out loud. Lianping, you killed my parents, destroyed my entire family, and destroyed countless races in the multivariate universe in countless spacetimes. You deserve to die. I wish I could drink your blood and skin you alive. The more Shang Tian spoke, the more savage his expression became. When Taoist priest Xian Xian, who was fighting below, saw the fragment on Shang Tian's forehead, he no longer cared about the interstellar cultivators around him. His eyes stared at the fragment on Shang Tian's forehead, and waves of shock rose in his heart. That's the creation Jade Disc? It was one, it was all, and it was the heavenly Tao. It represented the ultimate pursuit of cultivators, and it represented everything. Seeing the fragment on Shang Tian's forehead, Taoist priest Xian Xian no longer cared about the purple cloud palace's cultivators and interstellar cultivators around him. He turned into a stream of purple sword light and charged toward Shang Tian with no regard for his life. Old dog, do you really think you're worthy of being my master? Shang Tian sneered. A shadow flashed behind him. It was a middle-aged version of him who was over 40 years old. In the shadow, he wore an ancient robe and had a face full of vicissitudes of life. As Shang Tian sneered, he punched out. It was just an ordinary punch, but it almost scared Taoist Xian Xian out of his wits. In his eyes, the power of this punch was so heavy that it was as if the whole world was pressing down on him. The flying sword he had attached himself to was directly broken in half by this pressure. Xian Xian spat out a mouthful of blood as he was sent flying several kilometers away, crashing into a small hill. At the next moment, one shadow after another darted out from Shang Tian's back. They were all clones that Shang Tian had created using methods from the parallel worlds, using himself from other worlds. Each of them had the strength of the 6th or even the 7th peak energy level. Martial arts, immortal arts, magic, superpowers, biochemical abilities, physical strength, technological abilities. Each and every one of them was the pride of the heavens in other worlds. But the greatest difference between Shang Guotian and Shang Guotian was that they had chosen to stay far away from Lianping's world and not go against him. In Shang Tian's eyes, these clones from the parallel worlds were complete traitors and cowards. Therefore, he had borrowed the power of the creation Jade Disc to seal all of them and fuse them into his body, turning them into his clones. After sending Taoist Xian Xian flying with a punch and seeing Lianping standing there in a daze, Shang Tian laughed maniacally and shouted toward the interstellar cultivators. What are you guys still fighting for? I've already defeated and subdued Lianping. Why aren't you guys surrendering? The interstellar cultivators were confused when they saw the commotion on Shang Tian's side. However, when Shang Tian shouted out and Lianping did not react, they immediately realized that something must have gone wrong. However, just as Shang Tian said this, he did something that caused all the interstellar cultivators to be shocked and enraged. Your battle is meaningless because your king has already become an idiot. Shang Tian turned his head and slapped Lianping's face. Shang Tian knew that even if Lianping had been contaminated by the fragments of the creation Jade Disc and received the impact of the information, accelerating the process of his divinization and turning into something similar to the creation Jade Disc, it was still not something that he could destroy. Lianping might even disappear completely, making it so that Shang Tian would never be able to truly kill Lianping. However, Shang Tian still wanted to make use of this opportunity to give Lianping a few slaps. Take this as me letting you pay some interest. You'll always owe me more than this. However, just as Shang Tian's slap was about to land on Li Anping's face, an invisible force grabbed onto his wrist, causing his body to be unable to move at all. Shang Tian looked at Li Anping in surprise and bewilderment, saying, "How did you manage to react? I've said it before. Your abilities are very outstanding, but your choice is too stupid." Li Anping turned his gaze towards Shang Tian's forehead. "This thing is called the Creation Jade Disc. It should taste pretty good." Li Anping put out his palm and used his index finger and thumb to grab the fragment on Shang Tian's forehead. Then he exerted some force and pulled out the fragment. "How is it possible that you're fine?" Shang Tian looked at Li Anping in shame and fury. His gaze was filled with disbelief. The Creation Jade Disc contained all the information before and after a universe was created. Even if it was just a fragment, it would be enough to make any human's head explode. Even Shang Tian himself only dared to make use of it and did not dare to read the information inside. Shang Tian estimated that after Li Anping read a large amount of information, it would be as if he had gone through several tens of millions of lifetimes in an instant. His divinization speed would be greatly accelerated, and he would become an existence similar to the heavenly Tao or the Source. However, how was it possible that Li Anping was completely fine? Shang Tian naturally did not know. In fact, it was impossible for his original body in any of the parallel worlds to know about this, nor had he encountered this before. With the help of the tide of chaos and the accumulation of his clones, Li Anping had already stepped onto the path of a great string life form, becoming a 10th dimensional life form. To him, who was able to cross over and exist in any timeline and multiverse, the information contained in the Creation Jade Disc only tasted pretty good. Shang Tian looked on helplessly as Li Anping grabbed a fragment of the Creation Jade Disc and placed it in his mouth. It was like a biscuit being chewed a few times before being swallowed down his throat. Creation Jade Disc, Akasha's record, or rather, the source or the heavenly Tao. The information contained in this plaything from another world has allowed my power and knowledge to increase once again. You don't have it with you. Li Anping looked at Shang Tian coldly. However, this is only a part of it. The rest should be with your original body. Li Anping's right hand grabbed out towards Shang Tian's head. However, Shang Tian's head was like a door from a different dimension in Li Anping's hand. Li Anping's hand passed through Shang Tian's head and went to an unknown location. It was as if Fang Xingjian had put his hand into a bag and started taking out something. Shang Tian's countenance turned grim. He had not expected that not only had Li Anping seen through that he was controlling the puppet remotely, but he had also been able to pass through space-time to find him through the puppet. Separated by countless space-time at the southern heavenly gate in the heavenly court. How dare you trespass into the heavenly court? 100,000 heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals gushed out. The three-eyed general in the lead looked at the huge arm that had suddenly appeared in the sky and traversed several tens of thousands of meters in void space. Fury appeared on his face. "How dare you? Prepare to die." The moment he dashed out, Li Anping's hand grabbed him gently. Then with a sound, he exploded into a pool of blood like a mosquito. Li Anping's voice reverberated throughout the entire heavenly court. "Minor gods from another world, don't bother me. I'm here to look for something. I'm not interested in you guys." Chapter 472. In the depths of the heavenly court, on top of a pagoda that was more than 10,000 feet high, there were densely packed heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals in golden armor guarding the place. On the top floor of the pagoda, Shang Tian was sitting cross-legged on a futon. Beside him were Night Beast and Kadia, who looked nervous. Under their gazes, Shang Tian suddenly opened his eyes and shouted, "Oh no, he's coming." As he spoke, he jumped up like a frightened tiger or lion. His face was full of panic. When Night Beast heard Shang Tian's words, he also became nervous. "Li Anping is coming. How is this possible? The Good Fortune Jade Disc has no effect on him? D***, I don't know what's wrong." Shang Tian's face was extremely gloomy. This was the first time that something completely out of his control had happened since he awakened his ability. Originally, since he awakened his ability, he understood the direction of countless worlds in the past and the future. Everything was under his control. This feeling of something completely out of his control for the first time really made him extremely annoyed. According to what Shang Tian had done in other parallel worlds, he had used something similar to the good fortune jade butterfly to make Li Onping a real god. Not only could he make the other party lose his humanity, but he could also sometimes make the other party work for him. He could also receive the countless treasures that Li Onping had left for Earth. But why did it completely fail when it came to him? At the thought of Li Onping's horror and the almost invincible figure, Shang Tian's heart could not help but beat faster. Fear followed him like a shadow, and he could not get rid of it no matter how hard he tried. Kadia, who was beside him, said, "It's useless to stay here. Let's hurry up and escape. The most powerful gods in this world may be able to stop Li Onping for a long time. We can't stop him." Shang Tian's face was full of frustration. At this moment, there were suddenly earth-shattering shouts and explosions in the distance, making his face even paler. Kill. At the command, tens of thousands of heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals were like golden flowing lights. They raised various colored swords, spears, and rods and fiercely attacked the 10,000-meter-long giant hand in the sky. Behind them, there were countless golden-armored divine generals wielding crossbows, constantly attacking the giant palm in the sky. Every single sword, spear, and staff attack carried powerful elemental damage. Their might was comparable to that of a fourth-rank ability user. Moreover, those uniform long-range arrows were all covered in talismans, all of them carrying various explosive, vibrational, flame, freezing, and poison attacks. Its power was like countless intercontinental missiles exploding in Li Onping's palm. The celestial general who was holding a pagoda in his hand said, "Who are you?" He seemed to want to say something else, but Li Onping could not be bothered with these insects. The giant palm did not stop at all, and directly rushed forward along its original path. Along the way, the celestial soldiers and celestial generals who came to stop him were directly crushed into powder. Anger flashed across the pagoda-bearing heavenly king's face. He threw away the pagoda in his hand and shouted, "How dare you? Surrender now!" The Sarura Rui golden pagoda in his hand was given to him by Gautama Buddha. It had the power to suppress all kinds of demons and ghosts. The 7 levels of the pagoda could even seal all kinds of demons and ghosts. Normal 6th rank combat power could be easily suppressed by this pagoda. Now that the pagoda-bearing heavenly king threw the golden Sarura Rui pagoda, it spun in the air and became the size of a small mountain. It fiercely pressed down on Li Onping's palm. It seemed like he wanted to capture him in one fell swoop. However, how could such an attack hurt Li Onping? Seeing the golden pagoda falling from the sky, Li Onping snorted coldly. The 10,000-meter-long giant palm grabbed at the golden pagoda like the devil's claw of an ancient demon. "You don't know what's good for you." Amidst Li Onping's cold snort, this magic treasure, which had been exchanged with the pagoda heavenly king's life, was crushed by Li Onping. It looked as easy as crushing a Coke can. Terrifying light burst out from the countless fragments. However, after this magic treasure was crushed, the power that was comparable to the explosion of thousands of nuclear bombs was firmly grasped in Li Onping's hand, not leaking out at all. Throughout the entire process, the giant palm did not stop at all. After crushing the golden pagoda, it continued to fly towards Shang Tian's location. In the distance, the pagoda-bearing heavenly king's face turned pale. He spat out a mouthful of blood and fainted completely after the pagoda was crushed. Chapter 473. Seeing that the pagoda-bearing heavenly king had fainted, the heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals became restless again. They all watched as Li Onping's giant hand streaked across the sky. Only a young man with 3 heads and 6 arms, wielding a fire-tipped spear and stepping on the wind-fire wheels, sneered as he chased after Lianping. "How dare you, demon? If you want to invade the heavenly court, you'll have to get through me first. Get lost, brat." Lianping did not let him finish his words. With a flick of his arm, a stream of astral energy struck the young man's body. The young man could only feel a boundless pressure pressing down on him. His body was sent tumbling away. The power was so great that he couldn't resist it at all. He couldn't even slow down, let alone stop. He was truly sent flying. When the other heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals found him decades later, they found out that he had flown for 49 days and nights, all the way to the end of the heavenly river. He almost couldn't return to the heavenly court. Seeing that the young man was sent flying, another 4 golden-armored heavenly generals rushed over with a sword, a pipa, a crimson dragon, and a treasure umbrella. They were Dhritarashtra, Zhangzhung, Guangmu, and Vaishravan. The 4 heavenly kings had been famous for a long time and were very majestic. Seeing them rush toward the giant hand, the surrounding heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals cheered them on, but no one dared to follow. This time, Lianping was even more impatient. Looking at the 4 reckless golden-armored heavenly generals, he snorted, "Little gods from another world, do you take the patience of the strong for granted?" As he spoke, Lianping turned around and slapped. In front of this palm, the 4 heavenly kings felt as if the heavenly court was about to collapse. To Lianping, it was just a little bit more force, but to them, it was the strongest force they had ever seen in their lives. Before the force even reached them, they were already in despair. The 4 heavenly kings exploded into a bloody mist one after another, leaving only heavenly king Zhengzhang behind. His eyes were tightly shut as he waited for his death. However, after waiting for a long time, he found that he was still intact. He couldn't help but open his eyes. He saw a huge Taiji diagram floating in front of him, emitting the auras of wind, water, earth, and fire. It was this unprecedented supreme treasure that had blocked Lianping's palm for him. The true lord of morality and nothingness. The heavenly king's heart skipped a beat at the thought of that. The word retreat rang in his mind, prompting him to fly away in a panic. Lianping frowned as he looked at the Taiji diagram in front of him and grabbed Shang Tian's puppet. "Deity of the other world, you're strong. However, you're still no match for me. I'm only here to look for someone. I don't want to start a massacre." It's a pleasure to have friends from afar. At the same time, a figure strode over from afar. When he first appeared, Lianping sensed that he was still hundreds of thousands of miles away. However, after that step, he was only a few miles away. It was a middle-aged man in a Taoist robe who didn't give off any energy waves. Lianping sensed that this person wasn't the same as the one who blocked his fist, but he wasn't weak in terms of combat power. At the same time, the heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals around them were shocked. Lianping also knew the identity of these 2 people from their hearts. The true lord of morality and nothingness of the true lord of morality and nothingness of the jade pure lord of primordial chaos. "What a strange name," Lianping said coldly. "There's one more. Come out together. It seems that you're the most powerful deities in this world. What a strong, killing intent. We haven't even made a move, and you want to kill the 3 of us first?" At the same time, 4 shocking killing intents soared into the sky. Lianping sensed that this wasn't killing intent that could be produced through killing, but more like an innate and natural aura. At the same time, a red-haired youth appeared in the south amidst the 4 shocking killing intents. Lianping also read his identity from the consciousness of the surrounding heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals. Prime clear lord of numinous treasure, just as the red-haired youth finished speaking. The grand clear lord of Tao and virtue, who blocked Lianping's punch with the Taiji diagram, appeared on the other side. He was an old man with white hair. With a wave of his hand, the Taiji diagram disappeared into his body. An old man, a middle-aged man, and a youth surrounded Lianping in a triangular formation. Their actions caused a great commotion among the heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals, as well as the many immortals who had rushed over. They all looked at Li Onping with astonishment. The giant palm vanished in a flash, and Li Onping himself appeared in its place. Li Onping's eyes shone with a cold light when he sensed the trio's power shuttling through space and time and gradually pressing towards him. Do the three of you want to die that badly? The white-haired grand clear lord of Tao and virtue cupped his fist and said, "Please don't blame us. The four of us are too powerful. We're only doing this to protect the surrounding living beings from harm. We don't have any ill intentions." Li Onping narrowed his eyes and did not say anything. The three people before him had yet to reach the demonic god level, but they were all powerful beings who were at the pinnacle of the 8th energy rank. Compared to the level 8 warriors of the evil god tribe, they were many times more powerful, although the three of them were still unable to break free from their universe. They were clearly able to move freely in different spaces and times in this universe. It's not that I can't kill him, but if I were to fight with the three of them, it'd be too easy for Shang Tian to escape. Thinking of the remaining creation jade butterfly in Shang Tian's body, Li Onping frowned and said, "Shang Tian, leave him to me. I'll leave right away." Who do you think you are? You think you can come and go as you please? The one who spoke was the red-haired young man. As he spoke, four streams of sharp, destructive, and murderous auras came gushing out toward Li Onping. This caused the cold gleam in Li Onping's eyes to become even more intense. Just as the tense atmosphere between the four of them grew increasingly heavy, and the countless heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals in the layers of folded spaces in the surrounding sky broke out in cold sweat, that middle-aged man spoke up. The middle-aged man, called Primeval Lord of the Jade, pure Primeval Lord of the Origin, spoke. When he appeared, his fingers kept moving, as if he was calculating something. It was only now that his eyes flashed. He looked at Li Onping and said, "May I ask if you are the new 13th demon god of the Land of White, Your Excellency, Country of Delusions?" The 13th demonic god? Country of Delusions? A hint of doubt flashed in Li Onping's eyes. He looked at the middle-aged man and asked, "When did I get this title? And where did you hear this information from?" Hearing the middle-aged man's question, both the red-haired young man and the white-haired old man seemed to have understood something. They looked at Li Onping with complicated emotions. Chapter 474. Dao's friend, don't you know? The news of the new 13th demon god has begun to spread widely in the Land of White. Li Onping already knew a lot of things after the middle-aged jade, pure, heavenly lord of Tao and virtue, said this. First of all, although the three of them couldn't break through the boundaries of the original universe, Shang Tian had come here through the realm portal, which allowed them to come into contact with the Land of White. Furthermore, it seemed like they had come into contact with the various forces in the Land of White in a very short time. Li Onping didn't know about the news in the Land of White, because the forces on Earth were located in a corner of the Land of White and didn't have much contact with the many forces there. Furthermore, he hadn't traveled through the timelines of the Land of White for a long time. Even when he came to the Heavenly Court this time, he had used Shang Tian's connection to break through space-time and cross realms. Regarding the news of the so-called 13th demon god, Li Onping immediately thought of a smirking face. The people who knew that he had broken through to the demon god level were none other than the formless origin, the chaos tide, and perhaps the four realms. Besides the chaos tide, Li Onping really couldn't think of anyone else who would spread this news to the multiverse through the Land of White. Although Li Onping thought of many things in a short time, he still couldn't easily determine the chaos tide's motive for doing this. At the thought of this, he already planned to make a trip to the Chaos Sea after capturing Shang Tian. On the other side, the Grand Pure Heavenly Lord of Tao and Virtue and the other two didn't say anything. However, they didn't listen to Li Onping and hand Shang Tian over. Originally, they thought that although Li Onping was powerful, there was still a very high possibility that they could subdue him through Shang Tian and the creation jade butterfly. Once they succeeded, there would be too many benefits. With Li Onping's legacy, the knowledge he left behind, Earth, and most importantly, the creation jade butterfly that intertwined with Li Onping might break through the boundaries of the original universe. When that happened, not only would the human Tao of the universe they were in become more prosperous, but their cultivation that had been stuck for a long time might also be loosened again. This was related to their path of Tao attainment. The jade butterfly of good fortune that Li Onping wanted to take away was also related to their world and their strength. Although they did not know why Li Onping had suddenly become the 13th demon god and his combat strength exceeded theirs, the three of them would never give up their path of Tao attainment, even if they were to die. Perhaps sensing this, Li Onping's tone became even colder. It seems that we have no choice but to fight. At the same time, the creation of the heavenly court's heavenly court, the heavenly court of the heavenly court in virtue, and the heavens in virtue, the heavenly courts to success. The white-haired celestial lord of morality and morality was the first to react, and his voice rang out in the minds of the immortals around him. Retreat. Is golden immortal and above? No. Sensing the ripples from the void, his expression changed again. Everyone, leave the celestial court. The power of a demonic god was far beyond the imagination of any creature in the multiverse. When they were not in battle, or even in most battlefields, they would either reduce the pressure their power exerted on the surrounding environment, or allow their high-dimensional bodies to communicate with low-dimensional life forms. The bodies they revealed to others were often not their true form. Mortals could at most see a single point of their entire body, like a blind man touching an elephant. But when they began to increase their power and unleash the power within their body, or project their higher dimensional bodies into the three-dimensional world, the shell they revealed was known as their true form. Due to differences in personality, tactfulness, and power systems, the 12 demon gods' true forms and attack methods differed. Still, anyone who had seen it would see it as a lifelong nightmare. As if sensing that the surrounding immortals and heavenly soldiers were retreating too slowly, the true lord of morality and nothingness and the other two celestial lords used their mana to sweep their Taoist robes and send everyone flying out of the celestial court. But when their power came in contact with Shang Tian's tower, they discovered that although the towers seemed to be very close, their spiritual power couldn't touch the tower. It was as if the tower had turned into an illusion, shrouded in a layer of silver light. Shang Tian's face was filled with despair. He was shouting something, as if he was calling for help, but they couldn't hear Shang Tian's voice. Is this called true form? It's quite an apt description from your point of view. Li Onping's voice reverberated throughout the celestial court. In a brief moment, every substance in the celestial court was shrouded in a layer of silver radiance. Be it the pavilions, the immortal beasts, the clouds, or even the air, everything was covered in a layer of faint silver light. Amidst the silver radiance that exceeded the visual recognition of all living things, thousands of substances that resembled silver crystals combined to form a kingdom of silver crystals. All the phenomena in the universe were composed of electromagnetic force, strong force, weak force, and gravity. Even in other universes, there might be no electromagnetic force, no strong force, no weak force, or no gravity, but it was just a change of name and a change of method. The composition of these universes and the birth of various physical phenomena must have come from some element, force, or field. And within the silver crystal, the electromagnetic force, strong force, weak force, and gravity of this universe were all removed. A power that belonged to Li Onping began to replace the four major forces, unifying all phenomena in this world. Be it time or space, everything began to operate according to Li Onping's will. It was like a watch that had all its components forcibly replaced. At the same time, the other timelines of this universe were also gradually shrouded in silver radiance. Every choice was deleted one by one, as if countless branches were forcibly tied together. Through Li Onping's forceful unifying of the choices of one parallel world after another, the branches began to grow in the same direction. Innumerable parallel worlds were destroyed, or rather, fused into a single world. From the looks of it, It was as if they were gradually tightening their net in order to capture their prey. He was cutting off the escape route of the true lord of morality and nothingness's trio. Oh no, stop him. He's trying to surround us. Even as the red-haired youth spoke, four streaks of earth-shattering, killing intent shot out and vanished into the void in the blink of an eye. On the other hand, the true lord of morality and nothingness shook his hand and threw out the Taiji diagram. The diagram possessed the power to reset earth, water, wind, and fire, which were merely the four major forces in Lianping's eyes. Now that the Taiji diagram was thrown out, it was meant to counteract Li Anping's forceful use of his own power to operate this world. On the other hand, the prime clear lord of primeval lord of heaven shook out a panga banner. As the banner that could tear through space appeared, black cracks and massive holes appeared in the surrounding space. Between the prime clear lord of numinous treasure and the prime clear lord of numinous treasure, one was using the immortal extermination sword formation to slay the past, while the other was using the panga banner to communicate with the future. Both of them were using their own power to interfere with the development of other parallel worlds, creating countless choices and possibilities to create new timelines or parallel worlds, stopping Li Anping's act of merging all timelines. On the other hand, the true lord of morality and nothingness used the Taiji diagram to circulate the four major forces in the universe once more, resisting Li Anping's invasion of this universe. The reason for this division of labor was that the greatest difference between them and demon gods was that while they could traverse timelines and jump between different timelines, they had slain their own past, present, and future and fused them into one. That was why they could not exist in all timelines at the same time and could only work together to stop Li Anping's invasion. Chapter 475. From this moment onward, time and space became messed up. All of history was slowly changing. The entire universe's timeline seemed to be encompassed by streams of silver light and also seemed to be entangled by countless silver snakes. The four flying swords, one long banner, and one catalog kept on trying to dispel the silver corrosion. However, their efficiency was much weaker than that of the silver snakes. The probability of the entire universe was changing. It was because Li Anping had replaced many powers at various points in the timeline with his own powers, causing the entire world's foundation to change. Li Anping used his powers to replace the effects of the four great forces, causing the universe's parameters and laws in various places to gradually change, changing the flow of the entire timeline. Other than the three celestial lords and Li Anping, who could jump out of the timeline and sense these changes, the other living beings living in this world had no way of knowing or sensing that their history and consciousness were changing at almost every moment. In the sky, Sun Wukong kept on bellowing furiously. The muscles all over his body swelled up with powers that were sufficient to move the 5 mountains. However, he was unable to slow down the descent of the 5 Fingers Mountain at all. He could only watch in fury as he was rapidly being pressed down toward the ground. Tathagata, the Buddha who was sitting high up in the clouds, revealed a hint of a cold smile. The powers in his body seethed once again, and the speed at which the 5 Fingers Mountain was descending increased once again. Just as this historical event was about to happen according to the established trajectory, a stream of silver light flashed in Sun Wukong's eyes. Then his body instantly swelled up to over 20 meters, and his entire body was instantly covered in silver fur. A fist that was the size of a truck collided with the 5 Fingers Mountain, releasing a world-shaking boom. The entire 5 Fingers Mountain exploded in the sky, turning into countless meteor showers that fell toward the ground. Ha 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 ha! The huge silver ape let out a series of maniacal laughter. Tathagata, no one in the world will be able to save you today. Roar! After a beastly roar, the huge ape appeared before the Buddha. At this moment, wind, water, earth, and fire, which are also electromagnetic forces, strong interaction forces, gravitational forces, and weak interaction forces, all dissipated under the huge ape's punch. Wherever the silver powers passed by, everything would either be replaced or return to nothingness. His dermic powers were instantly dissipated. A stunned expression flashed across the Buddha's face. His head had already exploded like a watermelon. At the next moment, when the giant ape was about to send out another punch, for streams of sharp light had already shot out from void space. The entire sky was covered up by the red sword light. In the sky, the giant silver ape, who was trapped in the red sword formation, let out a series of furious roars. However, it was still unable to stop the red sword light that was everywhere from leaving streaks of bloody wounds on its body. However, every time the sword light struck the giant ape's body, it would be stained with some silver light, causing the sword formation's operation to gradually become sluggish. Even with the advantage of the fairy-slaying sword formation and the profound cultivation of Lord Lingbao, it was difficult to completely stop the erosion of Li Anping's power. The most crucial thing was that history had already been changed at this moment. With the Buddha's death, countless timelines were severed, and countless new parallel worlds were formed. However, this was just something that Li Anping and Lord Lingbao had done in passing by. Both Li Anping and Lord Lingbao knew that in order to change the direction and quantity of the timelines to the greatest extent, they would have to jump to the source of the timelines. The further forward the timelines were, the less power they would have to spend to make greater changes. Li Anping's main goal was to affect historical events that would have a great impact. In the cave of the slanting moon and 3 stars on Mount Fongsuan, a monkey's head was kneeling on the ground. It looked at the silver figure before it and said, "Master, I want to learn the art of longevity." The silver figure threw a glance at it, then lifted its head and created an ancient book. It tossed the book to the monkey and said, "Once you master this volume of the electromagnetic drive technique, not only will you be able to achieve longevity, but you'll also be able to dominate the world easily. However, with your aptitude, it'll take too much time to master it. I'll give you a hand." At the next moment, endless electric light enveloped the monkey. Accompanied by shrill, beastly roars, history was changed once again. Countless new parallel worlds were born, and countless old timelines were severed. On the extreme Dragon Ridge, Grand Preceptor One, who was enveloped by the heavenly divine fire pillar refined by Yun Zhongzi, suddenly froze. Accompanied by a streak of silver light, he escaped and changed his fate of certain death. Under the Chenang Pass, Li Jing's third son, Neza, was able to fly to the sky and dive into the sea as soon as he was born. He knew astronomy and geography. It was said that he had once been imparted to him by a silver man when he was in his mother's womb. On the Qilin Cliff, Jiang Zia, who was reading a book on the art of war, suddenly had a thought. He raised his head and saw a streak of lightning filling his vision. A lot of knowledge that did not belong to this world suddenly entered his mind. He felt as if he had lived a lifetime in another world and had just woken up. History was constantly being changed, but regardless of whether it was Li Anping or Primogenitor Lingbao, they were still constantly jumping to the past. However, it was no longer just violent fighting and killing. Li Anping's method of changing the timeline was becoming more and more subtle and increasingly difficult to control. He began to search for the most crucial point, attempting to use the least amount of power to pry open the history and make the entire timeline go the way he wanted. Both Primogenitor Lingbao and Primogenitor frowned when they discovered this. Originally, they hid behind the scenes and used countless small probability changes to govern and rule the entire universe, obtaining resources to improve their cultivation. They used the world as a chess piece and all living things as chess pieces. This was the method they were best at. There was no past, no present, and no future. They who could jump to all timelines could do this kind of thing with ease. But now Li Anping, who was at the demon god level, could exist at countless time points on countless timelines at the same time. He could also reset the wind, water, earth, and fire, change the parameters and rules of the universe at will, and change strategies. Gradually, he began to use the least amount of power to distribute across a wider space-time, manipulating the entire timeline. Be it in terms of breadth or depth, The battle on this timeline had gradually exceeded the control of the three primogenitors. During the journey to the west and the investiture of the gods, more and more historical events were changed as Li Anping shuttled through the timeline. He changed all kinds of minute parameters, changed the probability of various possibilities, and constantly reduced the number of timelines. Li Anping traced all the way back to after Pangu opened the sky. Primogenitor Ling Bao and primogenitor were completely at a disadvantage. Time and time again, whether it was the primordial age, the investiture of the gods, or the journey to the west, they used the world as a chess piece. The historical trend that they represented was always at a disadvantage in front of Li Anping's arrangements, causing the timeline to change time and time again. The space for their defense became smaller and smaller, while the number of enemies increased. And now, the silver crystal substance had already wrapped up the giant named Pangu in front of them. Li Anping would completely change the universe, and his body on the entire timeline would control the operation of the entire timeline from the beginning to the end. Chapter 476. The Grand Clear Heavenly Lord of Tao and Virtue, the Prime Clear Heavenly Lord of Primordial Origin, and the Jade Clear Heavenly Lord of Numinous Treasure felt that the situation was getting more and more difficult. Although they kept activating their magic treasures and magic power, they were still very weak against Li Anping, who had revealed his true form. However, although the situation was difficult with their current strength, it would not be easy for Li Anping to kill them completely. At this moment, the heavenly palace that the three of them were in was suddenly enveloped by a layer of silver mist. In fact, with the changes in history, the heavenly palace had also changed greatly. The history of Li Anping's pursuit had become the famous Silver Mother, Master Ge Yuan, and the first sage Li Anping in the heavenly palace, discussing the Tao with the three heavenly lords. At this moment, as the heavenly palace was enveloped by the silver mist, the heavenly lord of Tao and Virtue's expression changed. He shouted, "Oh no, we've been tricked." However, by the time the three of them realized this, it was already too late. They had spent too much energy fighting against Li Anping in the timeline. At this moment, when they retracted their magic treasures, the heavenly palace had already disappeared in a layer of silver light. The many immortals and heavenly soldiers in the mortal realm were all shocked when they saw the southern heavenly gate and heavenly palace disappear in the sky. However, they quickly returned to their daily work under Li Anping's consolation. In their memories, the third heavenly lord was discussing the Tao with Li Anping. In the end, he gained enlightenment and ascended to another world. Deep abyss, Avernus Plains. Many demons and devils that were still fighting against each other gradually stopped. They tilted their heads and looked up at the sky. They saw a heavenly palace floating above a white, auspicious cloud that was billions of kilometers long. It was curled up in layers of space and shining brightly. In the hearts of the demons and devils, this thing was too similar to the heavenly realm. However, logically speaking, gods were unable to enter the deep abyss. Moreover, the aura of this thing was different from anything the demons and devils knew of. At this moment, boundless lightning and sword chi scattered down from the heavenly palace, turning all the demons and devils on the ground into meat paste. A voice that emitted boundless killing intent and coldness faintly sounded from the heavenly palace. Li Anping. But the next moment, the endless demons were enraged. They began to attack the palace in the sky. The palace seemed to have turned into a huge millstone, turning countless living beings into dust. The Grand Pure Lord of Tao and Virtue, the Primeval Pure Lord of Primeval Pure Lord of Primeval Pure Lord of Numinous Treasure, who had been forcibly moved to this universe by Li Anping, waved the Taiji diagram, the Panga banner, and the immortal slaying sword respectively, venting their fury on the devils and demons before them, stirring up the already chaotic battle even more. Without reaching the demon god level, they were unable to freely jump between universes. Now that they had been sent to this universe, it was unknown how long it would take for them to return. Not only that, But the changes in the universe had also caused their powers to decline. They needed to adapt to the various parameters and rules of the universe, which would take even more time. Only then did Lord of Numinous Treasure understand Li Onping's intentions. From the beginning to the end, Li Onping had never intended to completely kill the three of them. Just as he said at the beginning, killing the three of them would take too much time. The more the red-haired, primeval, pure Lord of Numinous Treasure thought about it, the angrier he became. He thought about how he had been sent to an unknown universe, and how not only did he lose the creation jade butterfly, but even the universe he had been managing for countless years had been taken away by Li Onping in the blink of an eye. Even though his Tao heart had been tempered for countless years, he still felt a little uncomfortable. His eyes swept across the strange creatures on the ground. He snorted coldly, and 4 streaks of light shot into the sky. Like 4 brooms, they began to kill the demons and devils on the ground. After sending off the primeval pure Lord of Tao and Virtue, Li Onping's original form gradually dissipated from the 3-dimensional vision of ordinary people. He returned to his human form and looked at Shang Tian beside him. Due to Li Onping, the battle just now did not affect Shang Tian and the other 2 in the pagoda at all. At this moment, when they saw Li Onping turn his head and look at them, their faces turned pale at the same time, as if they had seen a ghost. The battle between the 4 people just now had completely exceeded their understanding. From the beginning to the end, they were confused. However, the only thing they understood was that Li Onping's combat power had far exceeded their imagination. He could probably crush them with just a glance or a breath. Kadia was the first to kneel down. This descendant of the ancient race on Earth was the first to surrender. Your Majesty, I'm willing to surrender to the humans and contribute to your Majesty's great cause. On the other side, Shang Tian and Night Beast looked at Kadia with hatred. They really wanted to kill him immediately. However, the 2 of them looked at Li Onping again, and there was only deep despair in their eyes. However, Shang Tian still said stubbornly, "If you want to kill me, then do it. If you want me to surrender or submit, don't even think about it." Although his voice was trembling, it was amazing that he could say these words in front of Li Onping. However, Li Onping just smiled when he heard this. Do you think that the so-called surrender or not really has anything to do with you? When Li Onping finished speaking, Night Beast had already knelt down. He looked at Li Onping with admiration and fanaticism. Uncle Yi, Shang Tian turned his head and glared at Li Onping fiercely. You changed his consciousness? I just helped him make a better choice. With that, Li Onping put out his palm, and the creation jade butterfly darted out from Shang Tian's forehead and landed in his palm. Throughout the entire process, Shang Tian let out a tremendous, agonizing cry. His eyes were crimson red, and he looked at Li Onping with a pale face. However, he did not say anything. It was because he knew that it was useless to say anything now. Swallowing the creation jade butterfly into his stomach, Li Onping said slowly, "You're quite good at creating trouble. However, I don't really wish to spend more energy on you or the 2 of you. Therefore, I'll leave it to you to deal with." He tapped out a finger, and a silver light encompassed Shang Tian's entire body. After the silver light dissipated, Shang Tian's gaze, which was originally filled with hatred, turned into indifference. It was as if the Ice Age had descended in his eyes. Looking at Li Onping, Shang Tian half knelt down and said calmly, "My master, what do you need me to do? Those brothers and sisters of yours who are stirring up trouble in the parallel universe, including all their friends, relatives, and people who are related to them. Chase after them, tear them up, crush them into dust, and turn them into ashes. Make them disappear from the multivariate universe. Yes, my master." With that, Shang Tian brought the Night Beast and flew out, heading toward the world-crossing gate in the White Land to begin his mission. This would be a journey of endless pursuit that might never end. Either he would be killed, or he would kill others. Next to him, Kadia looked at Shang Tian's back view with a face filled with terror. It was as if he was afraid that Li Onping would brainwash him as well. Just then, Li Onping's voice rang out next to his ear, "Don't just watch. Chase after them and follow them. Your mission is to keep an eye on them until the mission is completed. Yes, my underscore master. Kadia's body trembled, and he did not say anything else. He only followed with a heavy expression and stepped onto this endless path. Chapter 477. After defeating the expeditionary army of the Silver Shadow Empire, wiping out the Purple Cloud Palace, conquering the Heavenly Court, and dealing with Shang Tian, the crisis on Earth had finally come to an end. Li Anping then opened a spatial door that led to Chaoga City at the Realm Crossing Gate in the White Land and the Heavenly Court, connecting this enclave with Earth. Other than a large number of casualties among the cultivators at the Golden Core Realm and above, the other disciples of the Purple Cloud Palace, as well as the mortals who were under their rule, were still alive. The interstellar warriors soon found the mountain gate of the Purple Cloud Palace that was floating in the sky. This mountain gate was hidden in a folded space that was similar to a half-plane. It appeared to be only the size of a small town, but the layers of folded space were almost equivalent to 10 Earths. There were also over 100 billion people in it. Now, like the other worlds, it had become one of Earth's colonies. The huge palace stopped several tens of thousands of kilometers above Chaoga City. Although the Purple Cloud Palace still had many disciples who were at the Chi-channeling realm, the Foundation building realm, and the out-of-body realm, when faced with the current Earth, they were like lambs waiting to be slaughtered. After killing a few waves of resistance, Earth smoothly took over the entire Purple Cloud Palace and started to set up a large number of high-tech surveillance and control devices. They slowly integrated the entire Purple Cloud Palace into Earth's system so that it would be easier to rule. As for the Heavenly Court, although theoretically it belonged to Earth's colony because that world was too vast and there were too many experts, it was difficult for Earth to digest it for the time being. Therefore, Li Anping was still managing it himself. However, he only managed it slightly, allowing this world to maintain its original state to the greatest extent. However, he copied many immortal techniques from this world and put them into Earth's database. From then on, there would gradually be an additional power system that belonged to the immortal path on Earth. There might be many immortals who controlled flying swords and held Dharma treasures. Other than that, Earth would also receive the Silver Shadow Empire spaceships, especially the information and star maps. These would be of great help to Earth's future interstellar colonization activities. After many tests, Li Anping perfected the bio-traps, bio-controllers, impenetrable cloak, one-hit kill gloves, jumping daggers, and other technological products. He even created a production line so that these products could be used on the Black Star Troopers on Earth. Of course, these equipment were all made by Li Anping. Every time they were used, they would require Li Anping's authorization. In other words, every time they were used, it was like applying to the server. Only by applying to Li Anping would they be able to display their true effect. This process was too short, and the user basically could not feel it. However, it ensured that it would not be used by creatures other than Earthlings. It also ensured that it would not be used by Earthlings indiscriminately. Other than that, Li Anping still felt uneasy. In order to increase Earth's defense power, he created several more props. In outer space, the space orbit with a diameter of over 100,000 kilometers encompassed the entire Earth. Li Anping stood at a certain spot in the space orbit. He tapped lightly with his finger, and as light surged, the space orbit that was several kilometers long changed. Many silver metals were born from nothingness, becoming a part of the space orbit. All adjustments have been completed. Are you guys ready? The voices of some researchers rang out next to Li Anping's ears. We're ready. Then let's begin. 3, 2, 1. Boom! It was as if the entire heavenly orbit was burning with silver flames, and the flames gradually encompassed the entire Earth. This was the ultimate heavenly orbit that Li Anping had created for Earth. The outermost layer of the silver flames was a layer of space-time distortion shield. Any attack that landed on it would be distorted to another space-time. It could be a place in the universe of the past or a void in the future. It was like a layer of transmission door that was always open, but it was of a much higher level than that. The interior of the heavenly orbit was filled with man-made sunlight, starry sky, air, and gravity. It maintained the living habits of humans in the past. Of course, it could also be adjusted at will. There is even a large number of folded spaces that had been artificially created, causing Earth to expand by more than 100 times its original size. In the future, if the population were to swell again, these folded spaces could be expanded further. What was even more amazing was that through this ultimate heavenly orbit, humans could freely control the movement of the entire Earth and perform space-time jumps. Just like that, Li Anping turned Earth into a mobile super fortress, a supreme divine kingdom. As for the original location of Earth, Li Anping had placed it on Earth number 2, which had the sterile morality technique. This place would also be a human colony. With the activation of the heavenly orbit, countless data of the entire Earth gushed out from Li Anping's eyes like a waterfall. This kind of global change would affect the whole situation. He needed to conduct real-time monitoring and constantly adjust the system parameters in various places to ensure that the entire heavenly orbit's performance was at its best. It could even continue to operate with the help of the artificial intelligence system without his supervision. While Li Anping was transforming the entire Earth, human society was also changing rapidly due to Li Anping's black technology. The universal manufacturing machine was a machine that could directly create most of the things on Earth through the zero-point vacuum energy. An ordinary person, even if he did not know anything, could design anything he wanted to create with the help of the artificial intelligence system through the universal manufacturer machine. He could then pay for it with electronic currency and get the actual object. It could be as small as food, spare parts, watches, and mobile phones. It could be as large as robots, houses, cars, and spaceships. As long as one had enough electronic currency and authority, they could create anything. There was also the brainwave learning machine and the growth accelerator, which could allow a baby to grow into an adult in the blink of an eye and learn anything he wanted to learn. It could also shape him into a brave, wise, cautious, and peaceful character through the darknet. Even the attributes of one's body could be constantly modified according to the tutorials in the virtual world. There is also the youthful rejuvenation oral liquid, which allowed all humans to maintain their peak appearance. The automatic cosmetic surgery machine only needed half an hour to restore the user's appearance to the pre-designed one. In the beginning, most people were somewhat resistant to these things. However, the trend of technology was not something that could be stopped by habit. As time passed, more and more people began to use these technologies. Their habits also changed because of the technology. All humans became handsome men and beautiful women. Most people spent their childhood in the brainwave learning machine's virtual world. However, this virtual world was also connected to the internet. Therefore, they also had childhood friends and childhood playmates. It was also because a person's personality, appearance, and physical condition could be set and changed by themselves. All kinds of geniuses, and amazing people appeared one after another. All kinds of people with amazing talents in technology, magic, immortality, and martial arts appeared like wholesale. They pushed the development of the entire world's technology in reverse. There were also many other unprecedented black technology props that were constantly changing the entire human society. Perhaps in a few decades, any fresh graduate on Earth who had just graduated from the brainwave learning machine's virtual world would be able to create a new world in the eyes of other races. The entire human race gradually entered a mythical era. Li Anping was finally relieved. He drove his main body and rushed to the Chaos Sea. Chapter 478. Bubbles floated up from the surface of the Cyan Sea one after another. At first glance, these bubbles looked like ordinary bubbles. However, if one were to take a closer look, one would seem to be able to see scenes of the birth and destruction of worlds unfolding within them. It was not just the birth and destruction of worlds. There were also scenes of love and hatred, as well as the fickleness of the human world. It was extremely complicated. Li Anping could sense that each of these bubbles seemed to contain a small world. These small worlds were born in the chaos sea and then floated out from the surface of the sea along with the bubbles. When the bubbles exploded on the surface of the sea, the small worlds would disappear as well. The last time Lianping had come here, he had been in a state of unconsciousness and had not been able to observe the scene here. However, right now, as he looked at the endless cyan sea under his feet, a hint of curiosity flashed in his eyes. Through his scan, the sea under his feet was just a puddle of energy soup. There were no powers acting on it. Be it gravitational or electromagnetic forces, there were no powers that could form matter. There were no particles, no quarks, and no strings. There was not even any concept of space-time in the entire sea. It was just pure energy that formed a chaotic sea. Is this your true form? The chaos tide? Lianping frowned. All matter will return to chaos. He could imagine that if such a thing were to appear in the universe without anyone stopping it, it would be like ink contaminating a lake. It would be enough to infect the entire single space-time into chaos, denying the existence of any pure matter. It would be as if the entire universe had been cooked into a pot of porridge. However, what Lianping did not understand was that if this was the chaos tide's ultimate pursuit toward the so-called chaos, then what was the point of all the things he had done in the various universes, such as stirring up all sorts of wars and disputes? It would be faster and more convenient for him to drip his true form into those universes. In that case, what was the chaos tide's objective for doing all of this? This was something that Lianping had never been able to figure out. Just as Lianping was thinking about these, streams of cyan light gathered before Lianping. A man appeared before Lianping with a cheeky smile on his face. It was the chaos tide who had taken on a human form. He did not seem surprised to see Lianping appear on the chaos sea. He asked casually, "Why do you want to see me? Back then, when I helped you, you didn't even say a word of thanks and left. Right? Should I call you Lianping? Or the country of delusions? I don't remember when I became a demon god." Lianping's words were cold. Even though he was one of the 12 demon gods standing in front of him, the highest existence in the universe, he still looked like he was ready to fight at the slightest disagreement. Upon hearing Lianping's question, the tide of chaos chuckled. Do you know? Gold, blue, and gray have all returned to their original forms. The 12 demon gods of the past, including you, will soon be gathered. What number? You'll find out about this in the future. After all, we have an unlimited lifespan. We can always find the answer to any question in front of us. The tide of chaos did not answer Lianping's question. Instead, he brought up another question. However, there's a question that has always been an unsolved mystery, even to us. Lianping knew what the tide of chaos was talking about. Naturally, it was the question that the 12 demon gods, or rather, the 13 demon gods, including himself, were unable to answer. The ultimate. However, he did not say anything and continued to listen to the tide of chaos. It's because you and I have made an agreement of 1,000,000 years. After 1,000 or 1,000 years, the country that you've established will erupt with an unprecedented disaster. Have you thought about it? The divine country that you've established now exists because of your existence. After 1,000,000 years, regardless of whether you're tired of playing with humans and want to abandon them, or if Bai comes according to the agreement and fights with you once again, the country that you've established will collapse completely. And during this process, the country that you've established, the larger its territory and the more prosperous its development will be, the more terrifying the disaster caused by the collapse will be. Do you have a solution? Lianping asked calmly. Of course, he knew what the tide of chaos was talking about. Although Bai was an absolutely rational existence and would not do anything that required effort and did not benefit him, it did not mean that he would tolerate Lianping's existence without limit. However, when Lianping's threat level rose to a level that even Bai could not ignore, Bai would take action. Therefore, there would definitely be a battle between him and Bai in the future. Moreover, in the process of capturing Shang Tian, he had discovered something special. That was Shang Tian's ability, and it was very likely that Bai's shadow was behind him. Shang Tian's role seemed to be to help Bai integrate Lianping, who had not abandoned his humanity in various timelines. Li Onping thought of his battle with the three gods in the celestial court world. Perhaps the battle between him and Bai would not be a battle that could be settled by mere fists and feet. At the level of a demon god, a battle was no longer a battle in the ordinary sense. Under normal circumstances, the damage to the body and the depletion of energy were not decisive. The most important thing was the control of time and space. Such a battle was destined to span countless years. All creatures and arrangements, as well as various major historical events, would become a part of their battle and seize the timelines. Now, Shang Tian had become a chess piece in the battle between Li Onping and Bai. This battle was destined to span countless timelines and spaces until the end of the entire multiverse. Li Onping's eyes unknowingly emitted rays of cold light. Based on the current situation, it would not be easy for him to protect the entire human society and develop in the direction that he wanted forever. It could even be said that the possibility was very low. At this moment, the tide of chaos spoke again. However, this time, he did not speak in human language, but a large amount of pure data. These data were received by Li Onping in the form of waves. The huge amount was enough to cause any type of storage to collapse. Humans used vocal cords to communicate, and the speed of transmitting information was too slow. Now, the tide of chaos wanted to tell Li Onping a lot of information, so he chose this method to communicate with Li Onping. This was obviously normal. As a demon god, their every plan, action, and goal might need to span hundreds of thousands of universes and tens of billions of years to achieve. For example, when Li Onping fought with the three celestial lords in the celestial court, he manipulated the timelines. The war, society, myths, and battles between various immortals, mortals, monsters, and monsters were enough to write tens of thousands of wonderful novels. As more and more information was transmitted by the tide of chaos, Li Onping's face gradually turned solemn. He began to respond to the tide of chaos in the same way. The huge flow of data reverberated between their consciousness algorithms, forming a silent communication. Chapter 479. No one knew what Li Onping and the Tide of Chaos were planning. They only knew that Li Onping had returned to Earth 2 years after Earth's time. Right now, Earth had taken on a completely new look. For example, the concept of streets, stairs, and corridors no longer existed in the entire city. It was because these things had been replaced by countless transmission technologies. With humanity's current technological means, transmission technologies were much safer than walking down the stairs or walking on the streets alone. The process was extremely simple. As long as ordinary people controlled the mystic network with their consciousness and chose a transmission location, they would be able to instantly travel from any location on Earth to another location. Of course, the prerequisite was that the destination was a public area or a private area that had accepted one's request to enter. Safety, practicality, and efficiency were all surpassed by teleportation technology in all aspects. Aside from a small number of preserved ancient buildings and streets, everyone on the planet relied on teleportation portals to travel. Many of the newly built buildings didn't even have a door because no one used it. The weapons that Li Onping had created had armed a total of 2 million interstellar warriors. This was a terrifying army that could instantly kill most things in the universe. Depending on their reactions and judgment, they could move forward at a speed of 1 to 20 light years per second, ignoring most physical threats in the universe. Over the past 2 years, they had continued to help Li Onping expand Earth's territory and had brought the entire Milky Way under their surveillance. After all, with their speed, even if they were to cross the entire Milky Way, it would only take them 1 day's time. However, due to Earth's population and productivity, it was still too little compared to the number of planets in the entire Milky Way. There were over 400 billion fixed stars, and it was definitely not something that the current humans could take in. In fact, there was no need for them to do so. Humans relied on vacuum, zero-point energy, and mass energy conversion technology alone, and they would never have to worry about the problem of resources. Therefore, their colonization speed slowed down and almost came to a standstill. It was only when Li Onping returned to Earth 2 years later that a new round of great development started once again. This time around, Li Onping no longer took the initiative to promote colonization or exploration. Instead, he replaced all the daily necessities with black technology and created a large number of protective equipment to arm all the Earthlings. Next, he sent out 100,000 interstellar warriors to wipe out the entire Silver Shadow Empire. Faced with the Black Star Troopers from Earth, the Silver Shadow Empire, which had a history that was countless years older than Earth's army, appeared to be unable to withstand a single blow. This battle that spanned across countless star clusters only lasted for slightly more than a month before the Silver Shadow Empire surrendered and announced their defeat. The entire Silver Shadow Empire had become a colony of Earth, and the citizens of the Empire were the same as the creatures in the other magical worlds and immortal cultivation worlds. All of them had become natives and inferior citizens in the eyes of the Earthlings. Other than some technologies that were slowly becoming obsolete, they could not enjoy the black technology used on Earth. In the following period of history, the entire human race entered a period of rapid development. However, as there were no problems with resources, Li Onping wasn't interested in territorial expansion. Instead, he encouraged humans to explore the land of White and search for dimensional portals that led to other worlds, increasing his understanding of the dimensions. In addition, Li Onping spent more time on the internal construction of the human race and the spiritual guidance. At this moment, the power that humans possessed had also entered a mythical era. Often, a few people, or at most over 10 people, will be able to conquer the world on the other side of the dimensional portals and ravage it as they wished. Gods, heavenly demons, aliens, terminators, great demons. Humans played countless roles in countless worlds, allowing Li Onping to extend his influence to various dimensions in the multivariate universe. However, although humans tended to respect, treat each other kindly, and be friendly with each other, this wasn't necessarily the case with other races. On the highest peak of the Atlantic continent's divine temple, violent purple lightning filled the sky. A warrior with dark brown skin, a shaved head, and tattoos all over his body stared at the sky. He was the #1 warrior of the Atlantic continent. Behind him, the allied forces of various races gathered together. Colorful powers turned the entire place into a huge neon light. However, no one made a sound. Everyone looked at the sky silently, looking at the few, small black figures. Their countenances were unusually grim. The bald warrior was the first to shout loudly. His astonishing sound waves even caused the surrounding mountains to tremble. "Gods from another world, what are you doing here? The Atlantic continent welcomes visitors from afar, but we've also prepared swords for all malice." In the sky, a few men and women in armor looked at the native army below them with an amused expression. A man said, "The leader is about the 5th energy rank, but they're just small soldiers. There seems to be a god on this planet." As he spoke, he shook his hand, and endless black gas and red light appeared. 12 huge banners transformed into a large array, enveloping the entire mountain peak. The woman at the side frowned. "The 12 capital heaven divine fiends array again? Why do you all want to cultivate this? What's so fun about this array? Just use the biological control device to brainwash the natives below." The woman couldn't understand how this 12 capital heaven divine fiends array had become popular. It was as if all of a sudden, advertisements for such treasures were everywhere on Earth. Things like the Eastern Emperor Bell, the Heaven Divine Seal, the purple and green twin swords, and the capital heaven divine fiends. These immortal treasures became popular all of a sudden. In the woman's eyes, this was like the age of guns, but people still practiced swords and sabers. It was inexplicable. She didn't know who was behind this, but she was sure that this person had created a large number of treasures and sold them. He must have earned a lot of electronic coins. The man operated the array on his own, and 12 strange giant beasts rushed onto the mountain peak. They subdued all the warriors and sucked them into the array. Don't you think that the 12 capital heaven divine fiends array is very cool? I heard from my brother that if it absorbs enough living beings, it can be upgraded to the Blood Gold edition. The power of the array isn't weak either. If it's used at full power, it can even move stars. The man continued, besides, these treasures are very popular recently. I plan to try it out. If it's not too troublesome to upgrade, I plan to sell 20,000 of them. When the time comes, I'll make the Blood Gold edition and sell it to others to earn some pocket money. Boring. To them, it was just a power that looked good or bad. But to the natives of this world, it was an unstoppable and terrifying disaster. While the two of them were chatting, a water person and a light person rushed over from the east and west. With huge energy waves, they communicated telepathically. Gods from another world. Do you want to start a war between gods? You're thinking too much. The two of you are at most small frogs at the bottom of a well. With that, the two giant beasts rushed out of the 12 capital heaven divine fiends array. They each grabbed the water person and the light person, and they couldn't break free. Seeing their frightened faces, the woman couldn't bear to see them like this. She said, "What are you doing? Look at how pitiful they are. Let them go." As a result, the two native gods turned into pools of blood and were sucked into the 12 capital heaven divine fiends array. At this moment, a group of earthlings in armor flew over. When they saw the 12 capital heaven divine fiends array, they immediately frowned and shouted coldly, What are you doing? Why are you casually abusing the natives? They're living beings too. Don't you have any compassion? This is troublesome." It's those people from the Native Creatures Protection Organization again. They really have nothing better to do. The man who was performing the 12 capital heaven divine fiends array sped up the absorption process and replied loudly, "They're just a group of natives, living beings that are like ants. Is there a need for you to make such a fuss?" The few people who flew over glared at the man fiercely. However, due to the limitations of human weapons, they couldn't use them to attack each other and could only defend against each other. Therefore, they only glared at him fiercely and then performed their means, wanting to save the natives on the mountain peak. The other side was naturally unwilling to do so. Therefore, one side killed while the other saved the natives. To the people of the Atlantic continent, this was the start of a war between the gods. Similar things kept on happening in the various multivariate universes. Humans were harmonious, but once they arrived in other worlds, although humans were unable to attack each other, it would be an unstoppable disaster for the other races if they obstructed each other's actions. As time passed by, a debate on whether to treat the natives as slaves or as equals gradually spread throughout the entire human society. In the palace of Xia, Li Anping frowned as he looked at the data that kept being transmitted to his mind. Chapter 480. It had been 12 years since Li Anping had returned from the Chaos Sea. Under his rule, humans had become one of the strongest races in the multivariate universe. Within a short 12 years, they had traversed several tens of thousands of universes and conquered several hundreds of thousands of races. Moreover, this speed was still accelerating. However, as the number of humans increased, their territory grew, and their martial prowess grew stronger. Various problems gradually appeared before Li Anping. The problem of dealing with the Aboriginals was one of the most prominent problems. According to the policies set by Li Anping, humans on Earth were first-class citizens and enjoyed all the rights and obligations. The colonized Aboriginals were considered second-class citizens and enjoyed part of the rights and obligations. All the other living creatures that were not included in Earth's notice were considered third-class citizens and had no rights or obligations. As Earth's material resources were fully satisfied and their spirits were guided by Li Anping, all their weapons were completely monitored by Li Anping. This prevented them from having internal strife and were unable to do so. However, there were not so many considerations when it came to the Aboriginals of the various worlds. Especially in the recent few years, there have been various cases of abusing third-class citizens, slaughtering, and selling the Aboriginals. This caused a considerable portion of humans to feel uneasy. They had formed an association to protect the aboriginals of some backward worlds. Although they were unable to directly fight against the humans who tortured, killed, captured, and sold the aboriginals, they could help the aboriginals and send them resources to stop other humans from slaughtering or abusing them. To the aboriginals, they were like gods, guiding them to avoid the devil's pursuit. A crack was gradually opening up in the human camp. The humans enjoyed the life of slave owners, liked to torture, capture, and sell third-class aboriginals, and treated the aboriginals as their personal belongings. The humans who protected the local living creatures and respected the aboriginals' culture. Although there was no direct internal strife between the two sides, the conflict was getting increasingly deeper. They were equally intelligent, talented, outstanding, and were upright, passionate, and kind to their fellow humans. However, due to their different ideals, the same conflict had arisen. The only thing that they did not have to worry about for now was that most of the humans were still living on Earth. The games, movies, animations, and various cultivation content on the mystic web had caused many humans to indulge themselves in pleasure every day. Only about 10% of the people were interested in exploring the unknown world and venturing into the White Land. Of these 10%, only about 5% would go in person. The rest would use robots, avatars, or puppets to travel. However, Li Onping could still imagine that even if this ratio did not change, as long as the number of people on Earth continued to increase, the number of people on both sides would continue to increase. Although as long as he was still around, there would not be a real fight between them. Once he left, a war that spanned across countless universes and between countless races might break out. Furthermore, as various indigenous life forms gradually entered Earth, such as various elves, fairies, girls, princesses, and other slaves, the ratio of the two factions in human society would inevitably increase. The prophecy of the tide of chaos was gradually unfolding before him. If he was ultimately destined to abandon humanity, the later he did so, the greater the impact on the entire multiverse would be when they crumbled or split apart. The most crucial point in all of this was the relationship between the indigenous life forms and the humans on Earth in Li Onping's heart. Just then, a young lady appeared in the study room, skipping and skipping. The young lady had a head of silver hair, snow-white skin, and large eyes that were like the surface of a sapphire lake. She looked just like an adorable doll. However, because she was wearing a t-shirt and shorts, her two long, fair legs were revealed, giving off a feeling of youth. The young lady took a few steps and arrived before Li Onping. She then sat down next to Li Onping, grabbed onto Li Onping's arm, and said, "Father." The young lady was Li Sisi, who was already 19 years old. She had grown up in the palace and was doted on by Xia Yunyun and the others. Although there were teachers who taught her, no one sent her into the virtual world to learn and spend her childhood. Every day was just like a fairy tale. It could be said that everyone in the palace had watched her grow up. It was also because of Li Sisi's identity that she was unable to come into contact with many people and many things. Therefore, although she was already 19 years old, she was still very innocent. Of course, this did not mean that she was not smart. In fact, her IQ was very high. It was just that she had grown up in a fairy tale world that was filled with truth, kindness, and beauty. She did not understand much about cruel, evil, dark things, competition, and the truth of the multiverse. She pouted, puffed out her plump chest, shook Li Onping's arm, and said, "Father, today, Jin Yao and I controlled the cyborgs to go on an adventure on a continent. We saw many races, and they were all very pitiful. They can only live for 70 to 80 years. They can't fly or teleport, and they don't even have the mystic network. All they do is work and sleep. They can even eat ice cream every day. If they eat too much, they will even get sick." Li Onping nodded and did not say anything. He only listened to his daughter speak. Li Sisi was also used to her father not liking to talk. She felt that it was very cool for her father to be listening quietly. After all, in her heart, her father was the coolest man in the entire world. As for the Jin Yao she spoke of, she was Jin Guang's daughter. She belonged to the type where parents allowed their children to develop. She had graduated from the virtual world at the age of 7 and had nurtured her body into the appearance of a hot, mature lady in her 20s. What she loved the most was to go on adventures in different worlds. 3 years had passed, and she was only 10 years old. However, after going on adventures and battles alone in the alternate worlds, she seemed to be even more experienced than her father, Jean Guang. After all, Jean Guang spent most of his time in the military, unlike his daughter, who had come into contact with many people from all walks of life. In the past year, Jean Yao had gotten into great trouble in a high-level civilization and had been captured by Jean Guang. She had been requested to stay on Earth and receive special training arranged by Jean Guang every day for a total of 20 years. However, it was also because of this that she became good friends with Xiao Hui. Whenever she had nothing to do, she would bring Xiao Hui along to control the cyborgs remotely and go on adventures in the alternate worlds. Information about her flashed in Li Onping's mind, and he thought, in that case, Jean Yao is in favor of protecting the aboriginals, right? She wants to influence me through Xiao Hui. Li Onping patted Li Cici's head and said, Xiao Hui, since they're so pitiful, I'll give you that planet. Treat it as your birthday present this year. How do you want to manage that planet? What resources do you want to give them? Just list them out and send them to the artificial intelligence. Thank you, Dad. Li Cici hugged Li Onping with both arms and shouted excitedly. Li Onping felt his daughter's bulging chest unintentionally rubbing against him, and he sighed in annoyance. His children would eventually grow up. As for their identities, they were destined to live an extraordinary life. Moreover, with the current lifespan of humans, even people who did not cultivate would be able to live for several thousand years with the help of the life-prolonging oral liquid. Li Onping could imagine that as his children continued to multiply, there would be more and more grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Even if they were all kind and upright under Li Onping's spiritual guidance and control, they would not bully their own kind. However, once their ideals were different, the influence and power they could bring about would inevitably surpass that of ordinary earthlings. Just the number of such people alone would bring about a series of problems in the future. The moon waxed and waned, and people experienced joys and sorrows. The more Li Onping changed this world, the more he realized that every time he solved an old problem, more new problems would be born in human society. The longevity of the entire population brought about a series of demographic and ethical problems. As time passed, perhaps a man and a woman who looked the same age could be a great-great-great-great-great-grandfather and a great-great-great-great-great-great-granddaughter. This would bring about a series of ethical problems. Also, regardless of whether it was a man or a woman, when faced with thousands or even tens of thousands of years of age, could they really be faithful to one person until death? Or could they get married tens or even hundreds of times? Or could there even be no concept of marriage in the future? Although it had only been a short time and the problems had yet to erupt, Li Onping could already foresee these problems. All-round cultivation, becoming stronger, and possessing advanced technology would bring about a huge impact on other races. Once these races were taken back to Earth as slaves or pets by humans, various problems would arise. For example, if a man or a woman wanted to marry someone from another race, or if they especially doted on someone from another race, he might help that person's family and friends, or even the entire race. It was possible that some people on Earth would kill important members of other races, causing other races to go to war with humans. As time passed, as long as humans came into contact with more and more races in the universe, the number of hostile races would also increase. Was it necessary to exterminate all of them? Li Onping had already turned the entire human world on Earth into a God's nation. However, this God's nation was still unable to escape from new problems. It was constantly giving birth to new problems, and it could not perfectly conform to Li Onping's own moral values. This made him feel that it was perfect. He increasingly realized that the perfect God's nation he wanted was only a nation that conformed to his moral values. It was just like the world that politicians wanted, the world that murderers wanted, the world that cultivators wanted, and the world that magicians wanted. they would all be different. This was because the environments they grew up in were different, their moral values were different, and their goals in life were different. Naturally, the standards for what they considered to be good were also different. One person might think that killing people was normal, while another person might think that murderers should be sentenced to death, while another person might think that murderers only needed to go to jail. Li Onping increasingly understood that the nation he wanted had to gradually unify the moral values and values of all humans with him. He had to make the entire world conform to his values and worldview and operate according to his will. This was destined to be a long-term process. With the great abundance of resources, humans could create almost anything they wanted through void creation. Therefore, everyone had the best conditions that could not be better, resulting in a world that was infinitely close to fairness and justice. They were born and grew up in almost the same environment, and more people would have similar values and moral standards. One day, this ratio would eventually approach 100%. What Li Onping needed to do now was to constantly guide humans and become the ultimate safeguard for Earth, so that it would not collapse halfway. This was going to be a rather long period of time. A few days later, a new decree regarding the protection of primordial life was personally issued by Li Onping to the terminals of all humans on Earth. The main content was roughly that unless the target was willing or for unavoidable reasons, such as war, all other unrestricted hunting, killing, and trading of primordial life would be prohibited. Obviously, this was the judgment made by Li Onping based on his own values and moral standards. However, at the same time, on Earth now, not everyone agreed with this policy. Chapter 481. In a certain modern foreign world city, the entire bar was bustling with noise and excitement. Flirtatious female dancers, lonely and pretty white-collar workers, and beautiful female university students. There were all kinds of beauties gathered in the bar. All kinds of desires were released in the bar, causing the men and women in the city to reveal their long-repressed nature. In such a fanatical and even slightly obscene atmosphere, a black-haired and black-eyed young man who looked to be only 14 or 15 years old was sitting on the sofa with a cold expression. His aura was so special, so out of place with the atmosphere in the bar. However, the mysterious and aristocratic aura that he exuded constantly attracted the women around him. "Little brother, did you come here alone?" A voluptuous woman with a snow-white chest walked up to him and sat down. She wanted to put a hand on his shoulder, but suddenly felt a terrifying pressure coming from him. It was as if the person in front of her was not a person, but a human-shaped Tyrannosaurus Rex. "Don't touch me with your lowly hands. Get lost." The young man's voice was like the cold Siberian wind, blowing past the woman's ears. The woman's back was covered in cold sweat, and her heart was completely filled with fear. She looked like she had lost her soul, and in the end, she did not even know how she left. A few meters away from the sofa where the young man was sitting, a handsome young man in his early 20s was squeezing between three girls, touching them left and right, and laughing from time to time. He looked like a playboy. It was Lin Yin, who was already in his 20s. When he saw the young man's actions, he moved over a little and kicked the young man's knee. "What are you doing? You should relax when you come out to play. There's no such place on Earth. It's all virtual." The young man frowned, glanced at Lin Yin, and said, "Big brother, I used to admire you, but it's only been a few years, and now you've fallen. After such a long time, not only did your strength not improve at all, you even mixed with such a lowly race, indulging in the lowest desires. To be honest, you disappoint me." The young man's voice sounded directly in Lin Yin's heart. After hearing it, Lin Yin laughed and said, "Little saint, have you been in the virtual world for too long? I heard that when you were in there, all you did was cultivate and kill. So when you came out, I brought you here to relax. Listen to me, humans should live happily. No matter how long we cultivate or how hard we work, it's useless. We can't resist a single thought from a demon god. We might as well enjoy life and live happily every day. Come, accompany my brother. It's his first time here, so he can't let go." As he spoke, he patted a female student beside him and whispered something in her ear, causing her to giggle. Then he walked in front of the young man. But when he saw the female student walking over, the young man was like a snake. His eyes turned yellow and a cold glint flashed in them. Scram! The next moment, the student was sent flying by an invisible force. She fell to the ground unconscious, causing a series of screams in the bar. Lin Yin stood up and frowned at the young man. Sagely, you could say no if you don't like her. Why did you attack her? These women are very weak. If you had used more strength, they might have died. This is reality, not the virtual world. If a person dies, they'll really die. Ant-like creatures. So what if they die? Sagely threw a glance at Lin Yin and said, Brother, I wanted to discuss something with you, but it seems that there's no need for that now. You're the same as the others. You've fallen. With that, his figure gradually disappeared before Lin Yin like a ghost, causing a series of gasps in the bar. At the same time that the Native Life Protection Act was promulgated, another law regarding the Miners Protection Act was promulgated a few days later. This was to prevent the young Earthlings from being influenced by the indigenous life forms who were still living in a society where they deceived, competed, and attacked each other. This would cause their values and morals to gradually deviate from Lianping's standards. Lianping prohibited all Earthlings below the age of 100 from traveling to the other world. They had to stay on Earth for a full 100 years. During this process, they had to fully receive Lianping's guidance and education. Once they had a firm set of values and morals, they would not wantonly slaughter and violence. They would also not be arrogant and conceited because of their own strength, etc. They had to become a kind god in the eyes of other races before they could travel to the other world. After that, this Earthling would have to choose a colony or an undeveloped territory to become the god of that world, helping or watching the development of other civilizations. Or they could become a multi-dimensional traveler, experiencing the scenery of different worlds and participating in or watching from the side. Or they could stay on Earth and focus on scientific research, games, cultivation, entertainment, and other work. These were all up to them to choose. However, just as Lianping knew, some Earthlings did not like this. They might not be bad people in the traditional sense. However, they enjoyed the pleasure of doing whatever they wanted in a low-level civilization to satisfy their own desires. To them, stirring up trouble in other civilizations and doing whatever they wanted to do was the happiest. There were also some human races who thought that humans were supreme and that other races were just pets and slaves. The things they did would make them happy, but at the same time, they would make many other Earthlings hate them. Under Lianping's moral standards, this was not his ideal country. Thus, their actions were destined to be prohibited by Lianping. To Lianping, virtual worlds, artificial intelligence, and void creations were enough to satisfy all their desires. There was no reason for them to do whatever they wanted in the other world. It was an irrational desire that had to be stopped. However, in the entire world, and even the entire universe, the nature of the creatures was to constantly compete and eliminate each other. Regardless of whether it was between individual creatures, between one race and another race, or between one power and another power. These things would cooperate because of benefits, and they would also fight because of benefits. When one side was at an absolute disadvantage in terms of power, there would be no equality between them. It was just like the colonial era on Earth. The weaker side would be cruelly suppressed and exploited. This was especially so in the multivariate universe. Between different races, their life forms, civilization trends, and moral standards were often poles apart. Under such circumstances, when two different races met, the possibility of war, destruction, domination, and colonization was far greater than the so-called peaceful coexistence. This was especially so when the difference in power between the two races was rather great. In fact, for some races and civilizations, killing, destroying were their main principles and goals. Competition and elimination. This was the nature of the various races in the multivariate universe. After humans obtained great power, they would not be eliminated by other races. Naturally, it would be their turn to exploit, suppress, and eliminate other races. However, Li Onping wanted to forcefully change the nature of this universe despite knowing these principles. He wanted to realize the impossible proposition of allowing everyone to live a free and happy life. He was forcefully reversing this trend with his own power. It was like asking a lion to only eat grass and a tiger not to eat meat. It could be said that he was going against the heavens, going against the trend of all history. For all of this, he first solved the problem of humans' resources so that humans on Earth would not attack other races for the majority of their resources. Next, he would slowly guide the human spirit and moral standards toward his moral standards through the mystic network and various policies. In the human world, he would eliminate all sorts of conflicts and change the nature of competition and elimination between living creatures. He would realize a paradise where everyone could become gods and everyone would feel extremely blissful. There would be no conflicts, no disputes, and no bullying. They would be able to get whatever they wanted. This process would be an extremely long one. Li Onping did not know if he would be able to achieve this goal or even realize it within 1,000,000 years. However, in the days that followed, he continued to advance toward this utopia of his dreams. It was a world that he felt was right and perfect. As time passed by, the entire Earth society did indeed develop in this direction under Li Onping's intervention. Chapter 482. 100 years later, human society had become more and more developed. Their mental manipulation and attitude had also reached an unparalleled level. Personality and talent had become something that everyone could adjust. Just like how people reconstructed their bodies, they could modify their minds at will. Therefore, other than consciously adjusting their interests, hobbies, and personalities, humans on Earth also began to adjust their love. Obviously, this was also Li Onping's way of solving the ethical problems brought about by immortality. He guided everyone's attitude toward love in a rational direction. Under Li Onping's guidance, more and more people sealed off their lust under normal circumstances. In other words, they would almost never like or think about someone because of various external factors. It seemed that overnight, many people had become sexually indifferent. Both men and women became close siblings. However, this was only under normal circumstances. Once a couple decided to get married or felt that the other party was worthy of their love, they would adjust their brain's chemical secretions and consciousness algorithms to fall in love with each other. This pair of man and woman would love each other forever until they adjusted their bodies again. This adjustment was known as the adjustment of love goals. Ever since this function of the mysterious web was developed, human society had once again undergone great changes. It could be said that from a certain perspective, most humans were mainly divided into two camps. Firstly, there were those who wanted to get married and wanted to be loyal to their partner. They would usually seal off their lust. After finding a partner that they thought was suitable, they would adjust the other party to be their love goal. Then, they would get married and live together. However, because they usually sealed off their lust, they would take a very long time to find a suitable love goal. It would take hundreds of years, thousands of years, or even tens of thousands of years. Secondly, there were those who were unwilling to seal off their lust and did not want to get married. They liked to do things between men and women. These people usually maintained their lust and often indulged in virtual worlds or other worlds. In those places, as long as they expressed their desire, countless people of the opposite sex would be willing to get on their bed. Of course, although they were said to be in two camps, they were actually just two different attitudes toward life. Most people would start off with the second type of indulgent life. After they got tired of playing, they would enter the first type of life that was more rational. Lust would only occupy a very small proportion in their life. In the past, if most people wanted to get married, they would generally have to satisfy the other party's material requirements, such as a house, a car, and so on. However, in the current human society, material requirements were not considered as requirements. If one wanted to marry a partner, the other party would definitely request for a change in their relationship goals. Only when the other party's request was met could they get married. After marriage, both parties would have children. This was because before marriage, most humans would turn off their reproductive function to avoid unnecessary trouble. This led to fewer and fewer people getting married as time passed, because finding a partner became a very time-consuming thing. The concept of time also changed with the increase of human lifespan. Most humans had to spend hundreds or even thousands of years before they could find a partner that they were satisfied with. At that time, the humans who were only a few hundred years old or 1,000 or 2,000 years old would be those who hadn't had enough fun and wanted to indulge. Most of the humans would either be married or had sealed off their lust, unwilling to let their lust affect their judgment and rationality. Of course, there were exceptions to everything. Some people who were thousands or tens of thousands of years old might still like to play and indulge in debauchery. However, because of this, the growth rate of humans slowed down. As marriage became a cautious matter, the fertility rate decreased year by year, and family and conflicts rapidly decreased. Then, thousands of years later, most humans became more rational and civilized under the guidance of Lianping. While maintaining their interests and individuality, they became more and more like gods. Then, the Tomb of the Gods, known as the Village of Dreams, was born in Lianping's hands. A starry sky that flickered with silver light constantly rotated around Earth. There, Lianping personally cut out an insignificant part of the consciousness algorithm of every human on Earth and sealed them in the Village of Dreams. In addition, in the future, a part of the consciousness algorithm of every human newborn would be cut out and sealed in the Village of Dreams. The function of the Village of Dreams was to divide all humans into two parts. They would exist in the various worlds and the Village of Dreams at the same time. However, the amount of information in the Village of Dreams was usually zero, so they could only feel their bodies outside the Village of Dreams. The consciousness algorithm sealed in the Village of Dreams was like a certain internal organ that humans could not feel or control in the past. When they died, the consciousness algorithm outside the Village of Dreams would collapse, and the consciousness algorithm inside the Village of Dreams would wake up. After leaving behind a part of it, it would return to Earth again. In other words, my fellow compatriots, Lianping's figure appeared on the mystic net and on everyone's personal terminal. Jing Guang was cultivating on a neutron star with his wife and daughter. Jing Guang's face was full of determination. Suddenly, he smacked his daughter's head, which was full of reluctance. Yin Bei was on a spaceship that could cross worlds and was traveling through time. Behind him, huge four-dimensional creatures would jump out from time to time. They were like whales in the sea. Bai Xinghe was wearing an ancient robe and strolling in an ancient tomb that was floating in the void. He seemed to be looking for something. A huge flood dragon suddenly rushed out from the bottom of the tomb and pounced behind him. Xiao Laikong was still on Earth. Ever since he retired, he had returned to his original house. He had taken a liking to flowers and plants. At this moment, he was fiddling with a small tree. The fruits on the small tree were very strange. They all looked like babies, as if they were alive. When this batch of ginseng fruits ripen, I'll send some to little Hui. Dressed sexily, Emma stood in a certain laboratory and pursed her lips. The doctor, however, ignored her and stared intently at the control panel. Over there, a galaxy of universes that had been shrunk by an unknown number of trillions of times was slowly rotating. Fang Yuhuang was strolling in the original 100 Moons Palace, which was now a tourist attraction. He smiled and looked at Li Anping on the screen of his personal terminal. He said to Fang Yuelen beside him, "Sometimes I really feel that everyone on Earth has become incomparably happy and lived through the happiest time of their lives. However, Li Anping might still be the most unhappy and loneliest person in the world. It's because his goal, his dream, is too far away. Regardless of which corner of the multivariate universe or which timeline, the personal terminal instantly transmitted Li Anping's words into the consciousness of every human on Earth. My brethren, Li Anping said with a calm expression, from today onward, death will no longer be the end. All humans will bid farewell to the concept of death. I'll bestow upon you eternal life. All humans, regardless of how they died, would be revived in the village of delusions. Under Li Anping's repeated promotion, humans had entered an era of eternal life that they had never experienced before. Sensing the various messages that were continuously transmitted from every corner of the multivariate universe, Li Anping cut off the communication with his personal terminal and slowly closed his eyes. Bye. You once said that humans will never learn from their mistakes and will always keep making the same mistakes in history. Then, after receiving an endless lifespan and my guidance, I believe that they won't repeat history and wander in the cycle of good and evil. I'll eventually succeed and create a country that we're satisfied with. Just as Li Anping was halfway through his thoughts, Li Sheng, who was wearing a golden crown and stepping on cloud shoes, had transformed into a handsome young man, walked into the palace, and stood before Li Anping. His eyes were especially bright, like the stars in the sky. It was as if no matter where he went, he would become the focus of everyone's attention. Father, you're here? I've said before that there's no need to be so serious when addressing me. No, I think it's better to address you this way. Father, I'm here today to ask about the policy I submitted previously. What do you think? On a certain modern planet, Ling Yin yawned and pulled open the curtains. Sunlight shone in, and a series of screams came from the bed. 3 white bodies hid under the blankets. Ling Yin laughed and said, "What are the 3 of you shy about? I've already seen what should be seen yesterday." What followed was a series of flirting. However, halfway through, Ling Yin's expression suddenly changed. An earthling had contacted him through his personal terminal. It was Li Cici's sobbing voice. Ling Yin waved his hand, and the 3 women on the bed were already dressed and teleported out of the door. He frowned and said, "Little Hui, why are you crying? Don't cry. Tell me what's wrong." Little Saint is locked up." Li Cici cried and said, "Dad is so fierce. His whole face is black." Third brother is locked up again. Did he get into a fight and make his father angry again? Where's he locked up? When he comes out, I'll help you teach him a lesson. It's different this time. Li Cici cried even harder. He's locked up in the Eternal Night District. Dad said he's going to lock him up for 990,000 Earth years. Eternal Night District? Ling Yin was shocked. The so-called Eternal Night District was a randomly selected space-time or singularity before the Big Bang happened. There was no concept of time or space there. People inside could not feel anything and could not do anything. They could not even feel their own existence and thoughts. They could go crazy in just a few minutes. That was the most serious punishment for humans. Ever since Li Anping took over, only 3 people had been punished like this. At most, they would be locked up for a few years. But now, Li Sheng was going to be locked up for 990,000 years. Thinking of this, Ling Yin casually comforted her. "All right, don't worry. I think Dad just wants to scare him. I'll investigate this matter. Don't worry." After ending the communication, Ling Yin's frown deepened. He directly teleported and left this world. He never returned to this planet. Chapter 483. Countless years had passed, and the entire Earth was getting closer and closer to the divine country in Li Anping's mind. Although it had not reached 100% in his mind, where all the troubles and conflicts had been removed, other than perverts and bad guys, everyone was living a blissful life like in the legends. To put it simply, this was a world where Li Anping still hoped to reach 100%, while others felt that the current 99% was already very satisfactory. Despite this, there were still things in the multivariate universe that could threaten humanity. Tianjing, the palace. 2 people's laughter rang out from a bed, and 2 figures could be vaguely seen hugging each other, as if they were doing the deed between a man and a woman. When Li Sheng saw this scene, he turned and wanted to leave. However, Li Cici, who was on the bed, popped her head out. "You're leaving just like that?" As she spoke, a white dress appeared outside the bed. The entire bed was covered by a layer of black light, making it impossible to see what was inside. Li Sheng looked at Li Sisi. She was wearing white robes, and her hair was tied up in a bun, wrapped in a white crown. There was no sign of the weakness she had in the past. Instead, she was in high spirits, and her dressing was full of valiance. If it was not for her bulging chest and the redness on her face, she would have looked like a handsome young man. I didn't expect that I would come at the wrong time, Li Sheng said calmly. You've changed more than I expected. After so many years, people change. Li Sisi smiled and said, Brother, you've been out for so long. Why did you only think of coming back now? I have my own things to do. As for coming here today, I just wanted to ask. Li Sheng stared at Li Sisi and asked, Has he left? Li Sisi said casually, Dad left after participating in today's celebration. From today onward, I'll be in charge of the entire country. A hint of relief, surprise, and confusion flashed in Li Sheng's eyes. I didn't expect that he would choose you in the end. Otherwise, eldest brother is too lazy and you're too radical. Fourth brother and fifth brother each have their own ambitions. Li Sisi laughed coldly. And do you think that I really like this position? I hate Earth and its people. They're all a bunch of vermin. I often think that if we didn't have this group of burdens, our family might be happier and Dad wouldn't have so many troubles. I haven't seen him smile in a long time. Li Sheng frowned. Then what do you plan to do? You can't possibly destroy the entire country, right? Of course not. Although I hate all of this, this is my father's blood, sweat, and tears. Since he left it to me to take care of, I will naturally maintain it and guard this place that I hate forever. Li Sisi turned her head to look at Li Sheng and said sincerely, Third brother, can you come and help me? Not interested, Li Sheng said indifferently. I'm not interested in your choice at all. I will find a place to start my country. He wanted to build an empire that could conquer everything and all the worlds in the universe. Everything in this world will be trampled underfoot. Li Sisi said confidently, With me here, you won't have a chance. You've really changed. Li Sheng turned his head and wanted to leave. Just then, a head popped out from the black light screen on the bed. It was a female dark elf with pointy ears and silvery hair. Under her long hair that cascaded down like a waterfall was an alluring body that was not wearing anything. Your Majesty, are you still not done? Li Sisi waved her hand and got the female elf to return. She looked at the dazed Li Sheng and seemed a little awkward at the start. However, she still said calmly in the end, You're right. I like women. After saying that, a deathly silence fell between the two siblings. Li Sheng seemed to have been stunned by Li Sisi's righteous attitude and said weakly, Women are pretty good too. After saying that, he wanted to give himself a slap. What kind of nonsense was he saying? He turned and left. Li Sisi chuckled and said, Come back often when you're free. I have many girls that I can introduce to you. After Li Sheng heard this, he sped up even more, and his entire person disappeared in an instant. At the same time, in a folded space somewhere on Earth, Cho yawned and looked at the empty bar. He wasn't surprised. In the current Earth, how could there be anyone who would come to a bar? If everyone wanted to go out and have fun, they could go to alternate worlds or virtual space-time. They could enjoy whatever they wanted. They could get any bar, private room, and food they wanted with just a thought. Naturally, it was impossible for them to come to a bar. However, opening a shop was one by Chow's interests. He had opened an equipment shop in front of a dragon's den, a martial arts secret manual shop in a mountain forest, and even a divine weapon shop in the capital of a certain country. He had even opened a shop that sold immortal pills in the countryside of a certain feudal dynasty. He had opened an underwear shop in the celestial world and a children's toy shop in the demon race's territory. It could be said that opening different shops in different space-time and selling unique equipment to different races was one of his interests. The reason why he opened such a bar when he returned to Earth this time around was that Bai Cho wanted to do it. Therefore, he did it. The so-called just do it was a trend in today's Earth society. In the current society, opening a bar was something that could be done with just a thought. He casually applied for a piece of barren land in the folded space that no one was using. He then used the construction module and spent 10 minutes to design the bar. Then, he waited for another 5 minutes before the bar was built. However, this was already the third day since he opened the bar, and there was still no one coming. As expected, it's impossible to have any business opening a bar in such a place. Baicho yawned again. Forget it, I'll close it after work today. Therefore, he sat behind the bar counter and connected to the internet through his consciousness, browsing through various news and information. Is it the Empire's 1 million-year anniversary today? Baicho's lips twitched. It's really not easy. Races of the multivariate universe. You've been tormented by us for 1 million years, and yet you still haven't gone on strike. It's really been hard on you. Just as Baicho left his comment on the internet and chuckled as he looked at other people's comments, the bar's bell rang. There's actually a customer? As he thought about this, he lifted his head in astonishment and saw a young man with green eyes and green hair walking in slowly. The young man had a smile on his face. However, for some reason, when Baicho saw this young man smile, he felt that the young man was a little despicable, making him feel like punching him. As for the young man's hair color and pupils, Baicho felt that they were very normal. After all, with the human's current technology, it was too easy to reconstruct the body. Even Baicho himself had chosen white for his hair and pupils to match his outfit. Hello, what would you like to order? The young man with green hair smiled, shook his head, and said, There's no need for that. I'll wait for someone first. I'll order when they're here. Baicho felt that it was a little strange that a customer had come here. To think that he was here to wait for someone. It had only been 3 days since his bar opened, and they had not even done a single cent of advertising. He threw a few curious glances at the young man with green hair and then continued to surf the internet. He had left behind a few puppets to open shops in other worlds. It was a good opportunity for him to go over and take a look. It would be much more interesting than here. A few minutes later, the bell at the bar's door rang again, and another 2 people walked in together. One of them was a lady with a voluptuous figure, wearing leather clothes and pants. Her hair and pupils were both purple. The other was a man with black hair and eyes, and his skin was like that of a dark elf. The purple-haired lady sat down opposite the young man with green hair. Her round and slender legs were propped up on the table. She threw a glance at the young man with green hair and said, Pervert, why did you choose such a lousy place? Even the toilets in my house are more luxurious than this. The young man with green hair smiled nonchalantly and said, There's only one bar in the entire earth. I can't do anything about it. The man with black hair and eyes also sat down quietly. His voice was a little hoarse as he asked, The others haven't arrived yet. They'll still have to wait for a while. You know that it's not easy for them to make a trip here. It's not as simple as you guys. The young man with green hair smiled and said, What do you guys want to drink? It's my treat. Baicho pressed a button and selected the drinks ordered by the 3 of them into the ordering program. In a short while, the food would be sent directly to their tables. However, his eyes continued to look at the man with black hair and eyes. He kept feeling that the man looked a little familiar. He looked so familiar. I keep having the feeling that I've seen him somewhere before. Just then, a series of reports on the internet attracted his attention. It was news about Li Onping holding a celebration in Tianjin. Looking at the video in the news and Li Onping's image, Baicho immediately reacted. Damn, this idiot changed himself into His Majesty's appearance. And it's even the black version. TSK, he's really bold. Baicho's gaze flickered slightly, and he applied for an image recording function. The nanoworms in the air red immediately started to record the man with black hair and eyes. Just then, the entire room suddenly started to tremble. Under Baicho's astonished gaze, a big hole was knocked open in the bar's wall. A strong man with hair and eyes burning like blood flames walked in. There was a pure green parrot standing on the man's shoulder. Before Baicho could say anything, the young man with green hair stood up and said to Baicho apologetically, I'm sorry. There's something wrong with this person's brain. I'll help you fix it later. Baicho waved his hand, indicating that it was fine. It was indeed fine. He only applied the repair function, and the nanoworms in the air red took less than half a minute to fix the big hole that the man with red hair had created. Bai Cho only assessed the man with red hair curiously, feeling that his actions were really strange. At the dining table, the young man with black hair and eyes threw a displeased glance at the man with red hair and said, "Red, it seems that your brain is getting rusty. I never take detours when I walk. If there's something in my way, I'll just run it over." The man with red hair broke into a cruel smile. "Black, you've just reverted to your original form, and you can't wait to stand in front of me? All right, all right, all right." The young man with green hair waved his hand and said, "I didn't come here today to quarrel. Moreover, have you forgotten whose territory this is? Red, aren't you afraid that he'll bury your head in the toilet bowl and seal it for 10,000 years if you hurt a human?" Hearing this, a hint of displeasure flashed on Red's face, but surprisingly, he did not rebut. Seeing that the two of them had stopped, the young man with green hair assessed the man with red hair's shoulder. He looked at the parrot and said, "Knock off, King. What are you up to again? Gaga, isn't this good?" The parrot flapped its wings and cried out. Just like Red, all experts have their own unique behaviors. By being strong enough, one can be willful. Don't compare me to you. All right, all right. The young man with green hair waved his hand. It doesn't matter. Suddenly, the corners of his lips curled up into a hint of a smile. He saw a human figure, accompanied by endless silver light, arrive at the bar. He then took a deep breath, and his spiritual senses swept through every corner of the earth. Sensing that a few other streams of consciousness and powers had arrived on Earth one after another, he finally broke into a satisfied smile. After countless years of waiting and the transformations of space-time, humans, deities, and demons have finally all arrived. All the preparations have been completed. Lianping's figure slowly appeared from the silver shadow. "Then let's cut the crap." Hee. The tide of chaos laughed. Then, according to the agreement, the final banquet shall officially begin. Chapter 484. I finally finished the book. The man at the top of the food chain. I started uploading this book on March 13th until today, November 27th. Although it wasn't a long time, I wrote one. 54 million words. This is my first time doing so it wasn't easy. First of all, I would like to thank all my brothers and sisters who have been following Li Anping's footsteps from beginning to end. Without your support, I definitely wouldn't have been able to finish this book. Because a person's passion can be extinguished in a few weeks or months. But a group of people's passion can burn for a very long time. It's because you poured your passion into me that I was able to burn until now and finish writing this book. Looking back at the past one, 5 million words, there were many shortcomings, many things that I wanted to express, but due to the clumsy writing style, I couldn't express them perfectly. The only thing I'm proud of is that I wrote many of my inspirations. About abilities, about dimensions, about space-time. Although they were all made up and can't be considered a classic, at least I said many of the things that I wanted to say in my stomach. As for the food chain, I'm afraid that everyone has realized that there's a lingering charm at the end of the book. To be honest, I revised the final chapter for several hours, but I still wasn't satisfied. Perhaps it's because my level is limited and my writing style isn't good enough, but no matter how much I wrote, I always felt that there was something missing. The reason why I wrote such a lingering ending is that if I don't have to worry about the results in the future, and if a few old friends are willing to read it, I can write a sequel because there's still a story that I want to tell. Please forgive my greed. After all, this is a novel that I really like. I don't want it to end completely without any news. So even if it's just a possibility, I still hope to tell Li Anping's story again, and tell the game of the 13 demon gods. Now that I've finished talking about the food chain, let's talk about the new book. The new book should also be a story that takes place in the multiverse, but it has almost nothing to do with Li Anping. The new book will learn from the previous book and try to write an interesting story that everyone will like and like to read. In order to achieve this goal, I'm working hard to write the outline, setting, and draft. It's expected to be completed in a month, and I'll upload it by January 1st at the latest. If everyone still remembers me and the book food chain by then, I hope that you'll support me. Thank you. November 27th, 2014, Bear Gold Dog, that you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.